Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you all had a safe travel getting here. It is 9 o'clock already, and I see Representative Lekis is here, so we will open the hearing on House Bill 1548. Good morning and welcome. Oop, and here's a gavel.
I'm getting gaveled down already.
Yeah, there you have it.
All right, for the record, I'm Representative Tony Lekis, representing Hillsborough 38, the towns of Hudson and Litchfield. So I'm chair of the Joint Committee on Employee Classification. The setting of salaries is up to the legislature, but things around that come, periodically or regularly anyway, through the year, and just waiting until for the legislative cycle doesn't work. So there was an RSA that created this committee that can temporarily assign basically salaries, and then we're required to submit legislation for that to be confirmed by the full legislature. So if there are, there's the unclassified employees that are basically like salaried employees, and in the state as well as in private industry and the military, you have salary ranges that have a fair amount of overlap. And so for those employees, if either there's a new position or the department wants a change, there's a process they go through. The position is put out to a consulting outfit the state deals with, and they don't actually recommend a specific salary, but what they do is classify kind of the level of complexity and other aspects of the job compared to others. And so they come up with what the appropriate, it's a two-letter code, which might be the same as what the department requested, it might not. And those two-letter codes correspond to a salary range, and that salary range is actually in the RSAs, 94:1A. And for example, in the budget last year, when there was an increase for salaries, the numbers for all those ranges got adjusted. And so we listened to the department's request and, can ask questions and all that and come up, with a recommendation. And that's put into place right away. And then we asked for the legislature to confirm that. And that's what this bill is. It's all of the changes that were approved by the Joint Committee on Employee Classification over the last year. And so there's two parts to this. There's the ones that have been, there's ones that are deleted, positions that are deleted, and part of that's just renaming. Positions that were added, and then some of those were changed. And so if you look at the bill, it's got the letter codes for those. And then in section 3, the other thing the committee does is there are exceptions from the normal salary ranges because there's some positions that are kind of special, and it's hard to compare them to others. And that includes, in this year, state epidemiologist, the chief pharmacy board, compliance investigator, and pharmacy inspector. And there's others that we didn't deal with this year, but like the state medical examiner, who I think is the highest paid person in the state. So for the positions like that, the committee can recommend specific salaries, and that's in RSA 94:3B. And if you see the letter codes for these, and if anybody's wondering what they are, those are defined in RSA 94:1A. And if you look at that statute, there's actually two parts to it. It's actually looks like it's duplicated, but the first part is effective through July 12th of this year, and the second part is for after that, and that's due to the increases that were passed in HB2 last year. And that's really all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony. Questions from the committee? questions on this one?
If I do, I know where he is.
That's right. She'll find me.
He represents the same district I do, so
Yeah,
I have his
we're
phone
part of it,
number.
part of it, yeah.
Thank you, Representative.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. That's the only one I have signed up. Anybody else like to testify on House Bill 1548? Seeing none, we will close the hearing and, what did I schedule the next one? 9:15, so we got about 7 minutes before we can open up the next one. All right, we are back, and it's 9:15, so we can open, after 9:15, we can open up our next hearing. Representative Prue, we'll open up the hearing on House Bill 1078. Good morning, and welcome to EDNA.
Thanks for welcoming me back. Mark Prue, Hillsborough 15, Manchester Ward 8. So this bill is not the bill that I put in. It got amended in Commerce or wherever it was. And so my original bill was looking for antenna spots on cellular towers. You know, when they put up a new tower, part of the deal with is the local local town or county, and then state gets the opportunity to grab that spot. I'm not sure what happened. I missed one of the hearings because my clone wasn't ready that day. And it came back as a study for the division to start looking to see gaps in coverage. And to me, I was just talking, and that's gonna be a pretty monumental task for them to go around to every community and say, what's your needs? Because they all have them. So I'm really not sure what to do with this. I'd like to see somebody looking at the local first responders a little bit more than they are now. Right now, it's, as far as I can see, it's at the state level, and I get it. There's a radio interoperability committee that I actually sit on as well and represent the PFF&H. So we're doing some stuff there, but I'm just one little voice, and the state has a bigger voice than mine. So I'm trying to get, like, I come from Epping Fire at the moment. We're in Rockingham Dispatch, and it kind of sucks. And I don't really want to wait until somebody dies because they couldn't get their message heard that they needed help desperately. So I'm trying to be proactive to fix that. Like I said, I was looking for the spots on the cellular antennas so we can put up more repeaters easier than trying to build a whole new tower and all that stuff. So I'm not sure why that didn't fly, but we need to do something.
Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So, within the scope of the Radio Interoperability Committee or Commission? Committee that you sit on now, do you have at least a starter amount of data to move forward with what you were looking for? Or do you have the baseline? Like, or is this a start from scratch?
So I would say we have a baseline.
Okay.
Right? So we understand what we need, not exactly. So we would have to have, I know, like Motorola will come in and do a survey of your area and tell you exactly what you need. So we're looking at maybe doing that here in the near future. And we're also trying to get grants to maybe build up the system. But we're just one system, and I'm sure there are other systems that are struggling as much as we are. And I'm wondering if there is some way we can piggyback on the state system as well. I know a lot of jurisdictions don't like that because they want to be in charge of their own and such, but I understand, but we need to do something to fix these radio systems.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so, thank you. Yes, I do.
Could see you would think.
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, I'm trying to untangle the original ask from how this may serve that or
Yeah.
not.
So
And
I would be okay with this, but I know the gentleman behind me is not okay with this because he thinks it's a very big task that's gonna suck up a lot of his personnel, time, money, and such. So I don't know if there's a compromise here on how we can do this. He has more knowledge than I do, so maybe he has a better idea.
So perhaps the best thing we do is we'll let him testify, and maybe
Absolutely.
we can ask some questions there again
Yeah.
as well.
I would love
You're
to.
open to coming back, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony. You must be Mark Doyle? Yes, sir. Come on up. Want to make sure I call the right name. We don't bite.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Senators and the EDA. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you this morning. And Representative Prue and I have had many discussions about this at the onset of the bill as it was introduced over at the House, as well as subsequent conversations. And I've had some conversations with the folks at the House of Representatives during the original committee representation or introduction of the bill. Long story short is when the first iteration came out, it was designed, and I think Representative Prue did a good job of explaining really what it was to compel cellular carriers and other telecommunications constituencies, when they build towers in locations, they were to allocate a certain section of that tower, the top 20 feet, if I recall correctly, toward allowing first responder agencies in those particular jurisdictions the ability to locate their equipment on those towers to enhance propagation of radio infrastructure and communications in those areas. We at the Department of Safety, and I represented the Department of Safety as the Director of the Division of Emergency Services and Communications. I probably should have said that up front. And what we looked at when we saw that original iteration of the bill was a position that we were going to take as neutral, only because we wanted to make sure that folks knew going into that it wasn't as easy as saying, hey, we want to go ahead and put equipment on your tower and we want the top 20 feet. There were a lot of other issues associated with just that wording. And we provided testimony, which I can provide to this committee as well, regarding that first iteration of the bill and some of the concerns that we wanted to make sure folks, when they open up that door, what potentially could happen as a result, some of the consequences associated with that. And then it, as I testified, and then it turned a little bit more so that the entire impetus of that bill came full force on the Department of Safety. That amendment that came out of that discussion was something along the lines of directing the Division of Emergency Services Communications to conduct propagation studies, engineering studies, work with local constituencies, as well as radio vendors to find solutions to gaps in radio coverage, which is a huge and monumental undertaking, huge. Matter of fact, it takes sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a vendor come in and do these kinds of studies. It takes a lot of time to do that, and in many respects, almost all respects, but for the few agencies that might have a radio expert on staff, those are things that have to be contracted out. And it's not something that can be done through a quick visit to your radio communications site or section, because many of these, as you know, many of these radio systems, such as the one we have at the Department of Safety, are widespread. Currently, we're at 40 different sites around the state, 40 plus or minus sites around the state, where our maintenance team works diligently to make sure that the equipment that we have is appropriate, is leveraged to such a degree that our public safety partners at the state level, as well as the county levels that are tying into our system, as well as some of the local agencies that have the capability to jump on our system during emergencies, have that ability across the board. The other thing to remember, too, is that there's never, let me never say never, not in the near future is there ever going to be a perfect solution where gaps in coverage are going to be covered across the board. Right now, what we're seeing in the world of the technology that's available to first responder agencies when it comes to emergency communications, there are a lot of synergies and there are a lot of overlaps when it comes to LTE technology, 5G network technology, broadband provisioning, as well as land mobile radio. So there are a lot of things that are happening to mix and meld the different technologies so that they provide for adequate coverages, but there's no simple, easy, out-of-the-box solution that will cover all gaps in coverage. What I'm looking at right now in terms of the amendment that's before you is, again, more or less a larger responsibility that will be placed on our shoulders at the Department of Safety to investigate gaps in coverage. Gaps in coverage exist all over the state, everywhere. They exist at the state level, they exist at the county level, they exist at the local level. And what the Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, under the direction of the Statewide Interoperability Coordinator, is works diligently. They meet quarterly, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds there, but they have sub-working groups as well that identify areas in which interoperability solutions can come to play to help local agencies enhance their radio coverage and provide for emergency communications for their first responder constituencies. And that works out really, really well because the representation under 21P48 provides for a vast array of individuals to provide input from all of those sectors, from police, fire, emergency medical services, departments of information technology, and the like. So there are a lot of individuals that come to the table to discuss a lot of what's happening around the state. And they work together, not only just with the state or just with the county, but the locals will work together too to find solutions that have those capabilities. Well, what I want to do is make sure that the state doesn't overstep when it comes to stepping into the world of local communications. What we do, and we have done a great job at doing, is providing some direction to some of the local agencies, a lot of which don't have the radio technology experts or the subject matter experts to provide for that kind of advisory oversight for their radio communication systems. They have to rely on vendors and the like, which do a remarkable job, but they're few and far between in the state as well, and they're stretched. But what we do at the radio communications section in our division is provide a lot of that direction for a lot of the local agencies when they come to us with problems, as Representative Prue has just described. And we'll do what we can to provide for some of those interoperability solutions that we talked about, point them in the direction of some of the technologies that exist to enhance some of those coverage gaps, such as LTE or FirstNet coverage, for example, that exists in some areas of the state. The big picture is that we don't want to get into a position where we're able, I don't want to say able to, but we're committing to something that we're not going to able to do successfully or responsibly. And if we're in a position where we have to provide a report at the end of the year, which we can do through the Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee to address gaps in coverage and the solutions that we've come to bear for those that are brought up in front of the committee, is something that we certainly are capable of doing. But we just don't have the bandwidth to provide a resource as is described in the amendment that's before you right now. It would stretch us far too thin, and right now we're in the middle of a number of projects that our people are tied to throughout the better part of the next 12 months. And even if we didn't have those commitments right now, the number of folks that we have on staff certainly aren't in a position to be capable of providing a successful resolution to this type of mandate.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Carson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Is there any kind of a map that is available, maybe county by county or town by town, of where these, where this communication, where these things are? Is something like that available? Would that help at least identify where these poles are and where these devices are? I'm not sure what they look like that get attached to a pole, but where are they? And I don't know if you would do it working with town by town or county by county. It seems to me that that might be a better way to go, to get down to the level at the community and work with local police and local fire who utilize this every day, along with your, whatever you have, the town council, your alderman, and create these maps at the town level. And you folks then sweep them up, and you can then look and identify where the gaps are, and you can be of service to help fill those gaps.
Thank you for the question, Senator. And yes, those, I would imagine they do. I don't want to say yes, they do in all cases, but I think for the most part, when a vendor comes in and builds a radio system, that there are certain maps that are created from either an engineering perspective or a propagation perspective that will be provided to that agency or the town or municipality, or the county for that matter, that are building out a radio system or enhancing their radio system. They would be provided with where the areas are in which you have radio equipment right now. Some of them may be on their own cell sites, or excuse me, their own radio sites, or they may be on, some of that equipment may be on shared sites. For example, the Department of Safety has equipment on sites around the state. Of the 40 plus that we currently have equipment located at, the state only owns 7 of those radio sites. Yet we share through memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement sites that we have location equipment on that will enhance our coverage or spread our coverage to areas that would be otherwise underserved. And some of those go along with certain agreements for exchange of services. Some include rental agreements, some include long-term lease agreements. So there's either money exchanging hands or there's an opportunity to exchange services in kind for being on those locations. However, they are all, at least in my mind, in our world here at the Department of Safety, those locations are mapped, and we can actually give somebody a map that shows where those are. The difference is that those maps will exist for the different entities, but they may not be a perfect solution for what that agency is trying to do. So there may be a tower here that is owned by a certain county, but may not, it may be in that jurisdiction, but might not be helpful to the local or town municipality who has a coverage gap in another part of their town. Yet they'd have to look at who it is that's surrounding their town or it's adjacent to on their borders from a jurisdictional perspective to see if they could jump on potentially a site that their neighboring town already has in another town to provide that coverage into their jurisdiction, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair? Yes, it does. It's just that I would think that a town would know where these dead zones, I'm just going to call them dead zones, where they are in their community. And they would target those when they're looking to put something someplace to fill those gaps. It just seems like this bill asks the state to do something that what should really be happening is gathering the information at the local level within each town and look at it town and then county, because with the counties, you can pull the sheriffs in as well. But we've got to get some sort of baseline, and I'm just really surprised that the Department of Safety doesn't have that baseline. So they can work with the communities to say, hey, you got a gap here. And if you're going to do something, you need to do it here to fill that gap. Because, you know, when we ask our first responders to do a lot, and we expect a lot from them. And if you have these dead zones in your area, that could really mean the life or death for someone who needs an ambulance or there's an accident. So I would think that that would be a very, very high priority. So I'm just wondering if it would be better to just start at the local level and ask them to create a report.
Yes. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you. Of course, in District 1 up in Pittsburgh, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. A lot of gaps, hard to establish, even going into Canada. Now we're dealing with the illegal aliens coming over, and by the time a call is made that they see one, and because of the gap up there, they're gone. So the drugs are deposited and the illegal aliens are gone. So could you speak to that maybe? Because I know you're working on that interoperability committee as well, but there's so many facets to it and so many people involved, and there's a lot of acreage up there. So maybe just share a little bit about that. It'd be good.
Thank you, Senator, and that's an excellent point. I think it illustrates exactly what it is that's a real challenge when it comes to trying to identify the gaps in coverage. And to Senator Carson's point, those gaps in coverage are very well known, and I think Representative Prue will chime in here too, are very well known to the local first responders in the jurisdictions in which they work. In the Department of Safety, our troopers know where those gaps exist. They work around those gaps, meaning they know how to switch between frequencies or channels. If they have to jump on a county or a local frequency, they can do that to get help or assistance. The local agencies know that as well. Now in Pittsburgh, as you know, it's a fairly diverse, wide area of coverage. And there's an area of coverage that has no electricity capability at all from about 13 miles south of the Canadian border to the Canadian border. there's no communication in that area at all. So what we have to do, and we have been, is working with the chief of the Pittsburgh Police Department, the chief of the Pittsburgh Fire Department, New Hampshire Fish and Game, New Hampshire State Police, and we're going through a larger project up in the North Country right now with our Troop F radio system to enhance it so that it becomes a more simulcast directed system. We're adding an additional site to expand our coverage. Now, those capabilities exist not just for the New Hampshire State Police. Those frequencies are available to local first responders as well. So if Pittsburgh Police or Pittsburgh Fire can't get on their own town frequency, which they have access to through Northern Borders Dispatch, they can jump on the state police frequency to get help or assistance, which is monitored 24/7 right around the clock as well. Even though they're on the state police frequency, as you probably well know, Senator, there are still gaps that are going to exist in and around that area. It's not a complete coverage set when it comes to, and even enhancing the capabilities of our system. And that statewide police or statewide P25 compliant radio system is available for all first responder agencies to jump onto, as well as all the county frequencies are. They're designed in such a way so that through the FCC, during the course of an emergency, any first responder agency can jump onto any of those frequencies to get help wherever and whenever they need it. They don't need an MOU in place. They're only going to need that if they need to use that as their primary channel of communication. But to Senator Carson's point, those maps that you spoke about should exist at the local level already. They should exist at the county level already. The Department of Safety or the state has never really said, hey, we want to do a grab and grab all of that information and hold it in a larger database. That's not our role or responsibility. We want to make sure that what we do is responsible enough so that when we're provisioning emergency communication services throughout the state, the first responder agencies that may need to jump on and leverage our capabilities have that capability to do that in the areas in which it's covered. Does that answer your question?
Senator Carson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you just said, I think, is very interesting. I would think that the department would want to get the maps from every single community so you could have them at your fingertips. So if there is a particular issue going on in one area of the state, that you would know exactly where those towers are, and you can look to see if there's any gaps in information. So if this could be amended, if this is amended, that would direct the department to get those maps and keep them, on file, and receive updates from the municipalities. I'm wondering if that's one step in helping Representative Prue accomplish what he's trying to do. Because if you have those, the department can be a resource to multiple municipalities by identifying where those gaps are and saying, okay, you folks, you want to put in a new tower, this is where you could put a tower that would serve both communities. It seems like this is becoming very complicated when it really shouldn't be. So I'm just going to make that suggestion that maybe the department be directed to collect those maps, determine where there are currently gaps, and to be a resource for municipalities. I think that would be better than a study committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Doyle, did you have anything you wanted to respond to that? Or?
That certainly wouldn't be a difficult lift at all on the Department of Safety side. We should be able to obtain that kind of data. Again, some of that might be, I don't want to say proprietary, but I think the challenge long-term, but certainly something we could work on, is making sure that it's updated and current. A lot of these radio systems are currently being worked on around the clock and year to year, so staying on top of that information would be a little bit of a challenge, but maintaining that data shouldn't be difficult at all on our end.
So thank you for answering the question. So if this committee would ask for some potential language of what exactly you would need, would that be difficult for the department?
I'm sure I could find somebody who has the technical expertise to put that in language that would be appropriate for the committee.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, thanks for your testimony today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Karen Susi. Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Karen Susi. I work at Sheehan Finney Capital Group, and I'm here representing CTIA, the wireless industry. We are opposed to this bill. It's my understanding that the genesis of this bill started at a local issue where there were, I think it was possibly down near the seacoast, and there are dead zones. We've never had an issue with allowing first responders having access to the towers. It's not a problem. At this point, I just don't see that a study committee or investigation would be helpful when I think that we can all figure out, the real issue is towers. We need more towers, and unfortunately, there are towns that, for some reason or another, do not want to have them. Oftentimes it's in their view of their property at the seacoast. It's beautiful, I understand. But again, I don't see an issue for a study when we already know the outcome.
Thank you. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Ms. Susi. You heard the discussion that I had with the department. Do you think it would be beneficial for CTIA to be able to see that there's a map and see where there's gaps and perhaps propose to a community if you decide to put in a tower that this might be a good place? Would that be beneficial for you, for your industry?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I can see where that would be beneficial, and I would certainly go back to the client and mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Has your clients have probably already done this, exactly what we're asking them to put together. They probably are aware of the coverage and the whole gaps in coverage as they're looking at proposing new cell towers, because I suspect those gaps are pretty similar for cellular communication as much as the other frequency bands that their radios are using. Is there some way perhaps that you could help in this area? Maybe just a thought that maybe your client might be able to assist in getting these maps to benefit everyone.
Thank you, Senator. I can certainly check with the client. It's my understanding that there are different companies who do place the towers, so I'm not sure if there's a coordinated effort that would have to be moved forward, but I'm happy to check back.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. I have two other, Rick, did you want to speak? Is Rick here?
No, I'm here for just tracking the progress of the bill.
Okay. All right, and Kate, you didn't want to speak either? All right. Anybody else that would like to speak on House Bill 1078? Seeing none, we will close the hearing.
I think we can do money.
All right, next we will open up the hearing on House Bill 1030. And Rep. Sheehan, you are welcome to introduce the bill. Good morning.
Good morning, honorable members of the Senate. I'm Representative Vanessa Sheehan. I represent Hillsborough District 43, the town of Milford, and I'm here to introduce House Bill 1030. House Bill 1030 was always intended to be amended with any additional committees or commissions that were identified as inactive by the Special Committee on Commissions. No additional committees or commissions were identified, so the amendment adopted replaces all language in House Bill 1030 with identical language from Senate Bill 84 that passed the House on consent in January. Senate Bill 84 currently sits attached to a House message sent to the Senate that is yet to be acted upon. Senate Bill 84 was the vehicle that the Special Committee on Commissions used to repeal a handful of inactive committees. Both amendments, Senate Bill 84 and now House Bill 1030, repeal 6 inactive committees, The amendment also repeals the requirement that the House and Senate Committee Services staff jointly prepare an index on all commissions. The requirement was repealed because new software changes allow anyone to print an index from the General Court website at any time, so the scheduled printing is not necessary anymore. Additionally, the amendment repeals the John G. Winant Memorial Commission and places the maintenance of that memorial in the hands of the Joint Legislative Historical Committee, as they handle all maintenance requirements of memorials and artifacts on the State House complex. And finally, the amendment extends the reporting date to November 1st, 2024 for a newly established study committee of the Department of Environmental Services appeals process. And due to some confusion and some difficulty in making appointments, there wasn't enough time to do their work and to finish, so simply providing more time and changing the ending date was the most logical solution. And I'm willing to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative, for your testimony. Do you have any questions? All right. I don't think I do either, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
All right, John Williams from DHHS. Good morning. Welcome back.
Chairman
You've
Pearl.
created your own box of somewheres between favor and opposed, I see.
Well, we strive to get it right when we come and testify. So yes, the department isn't officially taking a position on the bill. For the record, my name is John Williams. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services, and I wanted to thank Representative Shaheen, the prime sponsor of the bill, for bringing this very important bill forward. It's good to have the special committee on committees. I know she serves on it, and I'm sure there were some discussions about removing outdated and antiquated task force commissions councils. So their charge is very laudable. However, the devils are always in the details. And the bill is introduced originally, and I believe the sponsor made reference to it, was previously, I believe, addressed relative to the 5-year dormancy that would result in an automatic repeal of certain legislation, and certainly that makes a lot of sense as well. However, I just wanted to draw your attention on, I was actually hoping that Senator Carson would be here, because this is an issue that she's very familiar with, and I would be very interested in finding her position to be determinative of what you may want to do with a particular section. But I wanted to draw your attention to page 2 on line 19. You'll see in section 5 of the bill, starting on line 15, and it proceeds through line 27, it enumerates a number of committees, councils, entities that are slated to be repealed. And I would say, in terms of due diligence, clearly, at least on the ones that I looked at, appeared to have been dormant for the statutory required 5-year period. However, like all things in life, there are things such as, like in the area of nuclear regulatory businesses, and there's been issues around dedicated accounts where they were looking to remove that. We brought to their attention, even if it doesn't happen within a 5-year period, it's important enough that you have to have that mechanism out there. So I'm drawing your attention to line 19. And again, my apologies to the sponsor, only because the bill is introduced was very limited, and this bill was replaced completely, including the list of the entities that were being repealed. So we just picked up on it. So I apologize that we didn't catch up with the bill sponsor earlier in time. Senator Carson serves as the chair for the entity that's identified on line 19 in section 5, Roman 2 of the bill, relative to RSA 21I14D, relative to the Advisory Committee on State Procurement. State procurement is an incredibly important issue, and her timing could not have been better to walk into the room. That Senator Carson actually led the charge in terms of developing this advisory committee, and it's been very, very effective going back to 2014 when there was a House bill that started that process, and even predating it, there was a task force back in 2012. But Senator Carson has served as the chair on state procurement, and by her leadership, working with the various state agencies, the Department of Admin Services, the Department of Justice, there were marked improvements in the state procurement process that was brought forward by that. And as I said, I would be very curious to get Senator Carson's take on it, because even though they technically meet the definition of not meeting within the last 5 years, they have been a very important place for us to go for conversations, particularly around legislation that's brought forward that deals with state procurement issues. Recently, the legislature passed in 2022 legislation HB 1504 that actually set forth requirements that American-made goods, such as steel, would be the preference for any time we would do a procurement. That would be one of those issues that would certainly be helpful to go before Senator Carson's committee just to see progress. Where are we? So what I'm trying to say is, even though nothing has happened in terms of the committee meeting in the last 5 years, there certainly is a need for the committee, and we would look forward to working with Senator Carson. On the other hand, if Senator Carson's already been approached and she has a different perspective, I will defer to Senator Carson.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Williams. Thank you for the kind words. This really was a collaborative effort because we needed to make some substantive changes to state procurement, and part of the issue was we were trying to make it uniform across all departments because that made it easier for vendors who wanted to come in and to work with the state. I would say that we have met in the past 5 years, and it was after COVID, and we had received great information because of the work that the committee had done and the changes in the law that had happened. That's why we were able to get all the PPP things way ahead of everyone else. So it did a lot of work. The problem is trying to get people together because it's once a year, but I do stay in contact with the commissioner, and I don't think this is one that should go because the state is in the business of procuring services, and we're still kind of in that phase where we're trying to get everybody on the same page, knowing very well that there are two departments. One is HHS, the other is the Department of Transportation. They have their own process because their departments are so large. So it's still ongoing. So I would hope that we would not get rid of this one. It truly is valuable. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
And I would believe that. Also, thank you for refreshing my recollection. I actually remember now that you stated it because it's not actually been docketed on the current bill. It was missing from there, but we did meet over at the Legislative Office Building in a double room right after COVID, I recall. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Any further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you for coming in. Kate? We only know you want to speak, but we don't know whether you're opposed or...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kate Horgan. I'm here on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Counties. We do not have a position on the bill, but we would also like to draw your attention to page 2, line 20, which is the County State Finance Committee. We met Monday. We meet quarterly every year and have for several years. We find it a very valuable committee and a great place to exchange information with not only DHHS and county governments, but Senator Gray, Representative Weiler, and Representative Erf also sit on the committee. We do not have a problem getting a quorum, so we would ask that you remove line 20 so that we could continue that committee's important work.
I had an idea that might be what you wanted. Questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank you.
That is all I have signed up to speak. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1030? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. Is Rep. Bolden? Oh, there you are, right there. Come on up. All right, Rep. Bolden is here, so we will open the hearing on CACR 13 and recognize you to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome to EDNA.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me, I guess. My name is Amanda Bolden. I represent Hillsborough District 25. And I just want to note that I think people are still in the process of signing up to speak on this. So for me, this legislation is personal, but not in the way that it is for the folks sitting behind me. The last name that I received from my dad is Bolden, and my fourth great-grandfather, Thomas Tyler Bolden, was a congressman in Virginia in the 1800s, and he argued vehemently against banning slavery in Washington, D.C. Interestingly, he's the only congressman to have died in the congressional chambers. He died mid-speech, so I am risking my life speaking here today. When he died, his brother, my fourth great-uncle, James Wood Bolden, won his seat in a special election. And while James was in office, he argued, that women shouldn't be involved in politics. He argued that it's a man's natural right to own another man. And I'm confident that by being a woman in office, who's allowed to get divorced, own property, have my own money, vote, and be elected, I am everything my ancestors opposed. And I'm proud of that. And in that vein, and as part of a nationwide effort to adjust state constitutions, but really as a reflection of my own family history, I put in this constitutional amendment to ban slavery at the constitutional level in New Hampshire because that's something that we've never done here. And obviously, the economy of the 1800s, it wasn't such a big deal in this state, but more specifically, New Hampshire's always been on the right side of the issue. And I think that it's important for New Hampshire to formally ban slavery in the state constitution to reflect its history of being on the right side of the issue. Two of the things that I've handed out to you are the wording of the federal 13th Amendment and a map from an Associated Press article that came out maybe a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, about prison labor. And that is at the heart of the issue here. In the 1800s, when the 13th Amendment was passed, it included wording that allowed an exception for prison labor to be slave labor. And if you look at the map from the Associated Press, to this very day, there are former plantations that held slaves that now function as prisons. And they're largely in the South. And it's a tough map because it's black and white, and it was color originally. But the darker color is where slave labor is used in facilities, and the lighter color is where it's not. So you can see that the South, did I get it wrong? I'm not holding it.
Yeah, I think, no.
The opposite?
I'm just saying that you have all these dots, and you said this is where they use slave labor. We don't have slavery in the United States. It's outlawed. So, I mean...
Sorry, let me clarify.
Okay,
so
thank you.
From a scholarly perspective, the definition of slave labor is when someone is punished for refusing to work. And in these southern states where they punish prisoners when they refuse to work, and the work is not part of their penalty, the money from the work goes to the facility. When they refuse to work, they're punished, they're put in solitary confinement, there may be corporal punishment, things like that. And there are major brands across the United States that use slave labor. Walmart, for example, Target, that use slave labor to create supposedly American-made products, but they're made by people who don't have the opportunity to refuse to work. And in New Hampshire, for example, when folks are involved in working in a position of incarceration, they're paid. It's very small, but they are paid. They have the option not to be involved. And being able to work, maybe you're mopping, maybe you're cooking, maybe you're doing laundry, that's a component of putting yourself to use and learning a new skill and contributing to the environment that you're in. And it is voluntary, and that's an important piece of it. And that's why, to my understanding, the Department of Corrections was supportive of this CACR because they're not using slave labor in New Hampshire. And it is voluntary. And that is part of the reformative aspect of incarceration. But in the southern states, more specifically, they are punished when they refuse to work. And that is the definition of slavery, is you're not compensated and you're and you suffer consequences if you refuse to participate. And there may be valid reasons for people to refuse to participate, such as death in the family, or mourning, or you're not feeling well. And for someone to be punished under those conditions is, the definition of slavery. And more specifically, I think from a historical perspective, and I like history, and I like genealogy. When the 13th Amendment was passed, it was soon afterward, we're talking within the next decade, that petty crime laws were passed all over the southern states, and they carried heavy punishments. So you could be incarcerated for vagrancy, for loitering, for being unemployed. And when you're looking at the population in the South that's likely to be homeless, unemployed, or loitering, they're almost exclusively former slaves who then, upon being set into freedom, had no job and nowhere to live. And so it was an intentional effort on the part of the southern states to re-enslave people through incarceration and through petty crime laws. And with New Hampshire passing a constitutional amendment that does not include the exception, we don't need the exception here. We're showing that even in 2024, we're on the right side of history. So I'm happy to take any questions, but I think that that's generally the concept here.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, because I'm trying to understand what you're trying to do here. This is not about race-based slavery. This is about the use of prison labor. I keep hearing you say over and over again, prison, people are incarcerated. So I just want to make sure that the public understands we are not talking about race-based slavery. That is completely outlawed in the United States. That is just abhorrent, and it was a huge stain on the history of this country. But what this is about is the use of prison labor, and you're equating that to slavery. So I just want to make sure that I have it correct when we're talking about this bill.
I don't think you have it correct, and I know that you're a fan of history, and I invite you to, if you want, when you get home tonight, look at, on Netflix, there's a really great documentary called 13th. I think it's captivating. My mom has even watched it a few times through. And it explores the documented history of the intent of the 13th Amendment, its wording, and the loophole contained in the 13th Amendment. The loophole says, except you have the printout, I don't, but that slavery is outlawed unless you're incarcerated. It's very clear that prison labor is considered enslavement. It was considered enslavement at the time that the 13th Amendment was passed, and it still exists in that way today. And we know that because there are Black Americans who are descended from former slaves who are incarcerated in the southern U.S. right now, working on plantations that have been converted to prisons. They're still picking cotton at these prisons, the same cotton fields that their ancestors picked cotton on when they were expressly slaves. So this is about slavery, and it is about prison labor, and it is about race-based slavery, because the South made an effort to target certain individuals to return them to the slave labor system after the 13th Amendment was passed. And like I said, the documentary is really great, and it's not that long. There's really big names in it, Angela Davis, the civil rights leader, Van Jones is in it, so it's not some weird conspiracy theory stuff.
May I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I appreciate you discussing history. I have 2 degrees in history. It's my love. You know that. We've had conversations. This is an amendment to the New Hampshire Constitution, and you keep talking about the South, the South, the South. What we do, if this should pass, it's not going to make any impact on the South and what they choose to do. Can you tell me if this is happening? I think you've already said that we don't do this here, so if we're not doing this here, is this just to send a message to our southern states that we don't like this idea?
I think that, and it has the effect of law. And if anything were to change in our culture or in the sentiment of future legislatures in New Hampshire, and there was a move toward prison labor, because we know that one reason that the North was so willing to take the role that it took in the Civil War is because slave labor wasn't an important aspect of the economy in the North. If that were to change, as economies do, I think it's important that we take a stand now, and we ensure that we continue our long history of not employing slave labor in our prisons in New Hampshire.
Follow-up? Thank you. Usually when someone is incarcerated, they've lost their freedom because they've broken a law. And a court, jury of their peers, believed that it was serious enough for them to be deprived of their freedom. So are you saying that if someone is in prison and they're told they have to get up, they have to go to work, whether, it's in the kitchen, if it's in the laundry, and we hear about the making the license plate kind of thing, and they refuse, are you saying that this constitutional amendment will basically say, well, you can't make them do anything, and they're just going to sit in jail, and that's it?
That's already the case. And that's why the Department of Corrections, Commissioner Helen Hanks issued a memo for the House committee that heard the CACR, stating that they don't employ slave labor, they don't force people to work, and that if passed, this would not affect their operations. And I think that's the thing, is that if we're going to actually consider banning slavery in New Hampshire, we need to take seriously what that definition is. And the definition is punishing someone for refusing to work, especially if that work doesn't enrich them personally. And you got to consider that people who are incarcerated have restitution to pay. They may owe child support. They may be looking to make some money supporting someone on the outside that they care about, that they're going to return to. They may want to build up some savings to support themselves when they're released. And no matter how you cut it, people need to be compensated for their work. If they're not compensated, it is enslavement. And when people are punished for refusing to work, that is enslavement. That's why we don't do that. The definition of enslavement is why we don't operate that way in our prisons in New Hampshire. And I understand that some representatives from the jails are here. They weren't present for the House hearing. I'm not sure what they have to share, but I want to note that a huge percentage, I'm thinking more than 50% of the population of county jails are pre-conviction. And that alone is an argument for not allowing any kind of slave labor, forced labor in county jails. Because we don't know, how do we expect them to differentiate whether someone who's serving a short sentence and is consequently in a county jail, or someone who hasn't even faced trial and is, from a legal perspective, innocent, or maybe just sitting out a bunch of parking tickets, who knows. It would be wholly inappropriate to force them to engage in some kind of labor, not compensate them, and punish them if they refuse to work. And as you noted, the purpose of incarceration is to deprive someone of their freedom. But that's it. And that's why we provide healthcare in our jails and prisons in New Hampshire. And that's why there are programs to reform someone. And in fact, the state constitution in New Hampshire clearly states that the purpose of incarceration is to reform, not to punish. And I'm not sure what aspect of forced labor is reformative. Otherwise, maybe we'd benefit from forcing some teenagers onto some farms. There is no aspect of parenting or any other sort of therapeutic intervention that involves punishing someone when they refuse to work. And I'm not convinced that forced slave labor is reformative. And it wasn't seen as that in the 1800s when the 13th Amendment was passed. It was expressly a loophole to return former slaves to the properties that they had already been working, and to put them back into the labor system because the Southern economy was so shook by the passage of the 13th Amendment. I think it's easy as humans over the passage of time to look at what is now and assume that it's that way, and it always has been that way for good reasons. But it is entirely possible that there are things that we have today that have long been that way and not for good reasons. And the South practices slave labor, the North doesn't, and I think there's a reason for that. And we don't need to stand idly by and allow this to continue and allow it to encroach its way into New Hampshire in future years. And I do think at the end of the day, as I noted, there is a nationwide effort to amend state constitutions to reflect the wording in the 13th Amendment and to exclude the loophole for a few reasons. Namely, I'm sure you're aware that in the House, at least, there's been bills proposed to secede, to have New Hampshire secede. And the reality is that, again, we don't know what the future looks like. And if the House and Senate ever pass that kind of legislation and New Hampshire secedes, there is no 13th Amendment to which we defer. If we don't have our own constitutional ban on slavery. So as a result, if New Hampshire were to secede, which I think is probably impossible, but we have like 30 to 50 House members supporting it, if it ever happened, slavery would just automatically become legal. And that's why it's so important to pass this at every state level, because we can't keep deferring to the whims of the federal government and how they want to dictate our operations in the state.
Thank you.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Rep. Seaver? I will just say to everyone, we have quite a few of you that have signed up, so if we can, just try and, we want to hear you, and we're interested in hearing you, but if we can try and keep it to 2 or 3 minutes, we'll get through this at a reasonable pace. And
Oh, yeah, that'll be fine.
all right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Representative Seibert. I'm from Hillsborough District 21, Ward 1 in Manchester. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't catch
I
that.
turn in. I get confused with the red. Yeah, my name is Christine Seibert, and I'm from Hillsborough 21. That's where I represent. And I think the previous speaker said it very well. I also think there's an extent to where it doesn't matter whether it's race-based or not. Slavery is just wrong. And I believe the exception to and the punishing for is not okay. The people are already in jail. And what she said is true. I was in the committee that originally heard this bill in the House. And I'd actually gone home, kind of unrelated, was watching something else on Netflix. We've been talking a lot about Netflix stuff. But there was one show called The Innocence Files, and it was about the Project Innocence program. And the attorneys on there were actually going to go visit a prisoner. I believe it was in Alabama. But it was one of the southern states. They were going to go visit a prisoner who was in the end was wrongly convicted of a crime, and they exonerated him through DNA. There was people right as you're going in the prison, and they showed it. A lot of people, they were mostly African American in the field, right as you're entering the jail, picking cotton. And so this does happen as a form of punishment. And the attorneys were very shocked by seeing this. They were like, it was like stepping back into the 1800s. And so that is shocking to hear and to see. And I just want to add just about this on a personal note. I mean, this is, I know my voters like to be involved in the process. This is a CACR to bring it to the voters, as you know. I think it goes a long way with your voters to say, here, you decide on this issue. And it would be great to say where you stand and to be on the right side of history. I also just wanted to mention that, a larger than 2/3 majority of the House voted for this amendment, or for the CACR to go onto the ballot. So I think that's really all I have to add on, as to not take up too much time, but I am welcome any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Representative Gathright, am I right on that? Yes, Gathright. Good morning. Welcome to EDNA.
Again, good morning, Chairman Pearl and Senate Executive Department and Administrative Committee members. I am here in a different forum today. I'm representing New Hampshire's NAACP. We have 3 chapters here. So I greet you on behalf of the New Hampshire branches of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, a nonpartisan and the oldest civil rights organization in the United States. New Hampshire branches are Greater Nashua area representing 13 towns and cities south and west of Manchester, as well as Greater Manchester area, and the Seacoast and Portsmouth representing Greater Portsmouth area. Over the past, the state has received bills requesting New Hampshire rescind from the Union. The citizens that make this request honestly believe in people only and no government, laws, rules, or regulations. We expressed concerns of people of color as well as allies across the state. It can be frightening to listen to the rhetoric that comes with leaving the Union as it permeates across the state of New Hampshire. When it is difficult to pass any bills seeking or improving the rights of Black, Indigenous people of color, I truly do, or I should say we truly do not understand nor comprehend the people in this day and age, still do not believe in equality with an equity lens. Remember, we are the live and die free state. Many members who have 3 or more generations in New Hampshire have lived here most of their lives and are truly disappointed and perplexed when we hear comments in the State House that racial profiling is old and I'm tired of hearing about it, or when we receive letters or emails of hate from New Hampshire residents or negative comments. Innuendos and plain downright ignorance of some is truly heartening to all of us. In the words of other advocates, the passing of CACR 13 reflects a commitment to ensuring that such practices are forbidden in the state of New Hampshire. It is a significant step towards justice and equality. So as we make laws to protect all people, we request your support of CACR 13. It is important that we make a strong statement in our Constitution that slavery or involuntary servitude is not who we are or what we are in the state of New Hampshire. We do that by placing explicit documentation in our New Hampshire Constitution. We do that by voting yes in support of CACR 13. Thank you for listening to our feelings on what this bill would actually do for the state of New Hampshire. And I say that as Linda Gathwaite, New Hampshire NAACP State Director and President of Greater Nashua NAACP, Chapter 2008B, as well as Reverend Robert Thompson, President of Seacoast Branch of Portsmouth, New Hampshire since 1958, and James McKinn, President of Greater Manchester Area Branch, 2069 since 1964.
Thank you.
And I will take any questions if you have them.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler. Excuse me, Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my, I would say thank you, Representative, because you still are. But I appreciate and honor the dual roles that you play in your service to the state of New Hampshire. And when we talk about constitutional amendments, they are a statement of values, an aspirational, and sometimes they are a planting of a flag. And it's my understanding that your testimony is that New Hampshire has an opportunity to plant its flag and move from the aspirational ether into the solid ground of a value statement. Is that?
I would say that's correct.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning.
Would you object if on the instructions to the voter that the term involuntary servitude be defined? Because I think that's where I'm struggling. I mean, I have no issue with slavery. It's really, what are we talking about when we're talking about involuntary servitude? That the people have the right to know, what are you talking about? What does that mean in order to be an informed voter when it comes time to vote?
So are you looking for a definition you would like to
some
come out
sort
of this?
Yeah, some
Okay.
sort of a definition.
I will
So-
definitely work
because
with
I
the
can't
sponsor to
imagine
come. So,
Representative anyone in this state voting to support slavery in any form. It's just, I think that it's a little confusing when you talk about involuntary servitude. I think the constitutional amendment needs to be very clear what you're talking about. I think here, because we're able to have these discussions, we get a clearer idea of what you're talking about. So I'm just wondering if you would object if this was instructions, in the instructions to the voter, this is what we're talking about.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think the NAACP would either.
Thank you.
Okay.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for coming in today. Welcome. Dennis Febo, hopefully I get the last name right, and I'll apologize if I don't. Dennis? Good morning, and welcome to EDNA. Turn your mic on, please. Just hit the button. There you go, thank you.
Okay. So my name is Dennis Febo. I drove all the way up here from New Jersey to come be with you lovely folks. I'm the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery National Network. Our organization has been going around the country abolishing constitutional slavery. We've done so successfully in 7 states, while Rhode Island had done so initially when we first started this back in history. I think this is a pretty clear-cut conversation because it seems like people want to get stuck in the weeds about trying to define things, and it starts to look a little disconnected and insensitive, right? Because we're talking about a very simple issue, number one, that's outlined in international law. Article 4, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, slavery should be abolished in all of its forms. The exception clause in the United States Constitution and for the states that hold it are participating in a form of slavery. Now, if we want to do a distinction between slavery and involuntary servitude, slavery when it talks about propertization of the body, involuntary servitude speaking about work. However, Black's Law Dictionary, definition of involuntary servitude, the term used when a person is forced to work against his will, period. Slavery, period. It's the same thing. According to Black's Law, there's no distinction between slavery and involuntary servitude. And if someone needed to argue that involuntary servitude as slavery needed to exist in order for the justice system to do what they do, anyone arguing for the permanence of slavery and involuntary servitude is technically violating international law. It shouldn't even be a discussion. It needs to be abolished in all of its forms. It's also not restricted to labor, right? The issues of slavery and involuntary servitude, if anybody understands post-abolition, 1866, Section 2 of the 13th Amendment, the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau and the federal government sending all of its agents to every state looking for all of the badges and incidents. Convict leasing, which was mentioned before, those that were freed from slavery, the 13th Amendment exception, as per Abraham Lincoln's understanding, and this goes back to 1777, was to be able to use the labor continuously post-slavery abolition and created an entire economy where, for example, the state of Alabama gross domestic product, almost 80% of it came from convict leasing. The state of Alabama would not exist if that didn't happen, right? So we're saying not just what happened in history and that the states that we're on and the economy that we stand on was built upon these constructs. They're still legal today. In the federal constitution, it says except as punishment for crime. If something has an exception, it is not abolished. So to say that slavery is abolished, and then we're going to go into the racial one. New Hampshire has double the amount of prisoners than England. Out of that, 5.7% times higher black people than white people on the federal scale. 67% of those incarcerated are black and brown. 92% of elected prosecutors are white. This is the most racist system in the world. And to not acknowledge it, because here we're going to say the numbers ain't lying, prisonpolicy.org, if 90% of New Hampshire is white, why do we have 5.7 times more percent black people in prison? If we are 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's incarcerated, we are out of line. We have designed a system that keeps economy down, specifically for people of color in this country, and this loophole has been used in all kinds of ways, not just in labor. The ability to vote, the conversation on wages, locomotion, parole, probation, the whole, conditions of confinement, all of it revolves around slavery. And we're in 2024 having a conversation, and I really want to see who comes up here to defend it, because now we know who's in violation of international law. It is illegal. Do we uphold international law in the United States? Maybe not, but I know what it is. This is where our Constitution came from, and we already signed the Convention of 1926. It's already illegal on the federal scale. There's two laws that are opposite to each other in the federal scale, and we're choosing to look at one. But if I'm looking at the United States standard in the world, do we stand in standard to the rest of the world? Does New Hampshire? The answer is absolutely not. Your Constitution allows for its legality. There shouldn't be any other discussion. It should just be illegal. If someone has to argue why it needs to be legal in order for corrections to do business, in order for us to talk about an inmate cleaning their cell, if you feel like slavery is necessary, then you argue for it. You tell us why it's involuntary servitude. Don't ask us to define it. It's already defined. But getting us stuck in the weeds when we're trying to argue on international law, I don't think is fair, and I think it's insensitive. Right? Here we're saying, can we just make slavery and involuntary servitude illegal finally in 2024 in the state of New Hampshire? Can the people decide? That's the question. But for us to get caught in technicalities or to listen to people who have used this system, whether public or private, to profit off of it, I don't think it's fair. All right, so to say that we have ended slavery in Colorado, Utah, Nebraska, Tennessee, Alabama, slavery's not in the South, slavery's all over the United States, wherever it's legal constitutionally, including the islands of Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Guam, and the Mariana Islands. It's not about the South. This is all over the place. And what we're doing is trying to end it, not just on every state level to adhere to international law, but also to reach the mark in 38 states so we can repeal and replace the 13th Amendment and replace with the 28th, permanently abolishing slavery in the United States of America. That federal bill is up, sponsored by Merkley, Sanders, Booker, and Williams. Your state assembly, 366 of them already voted and acknowledged that slavery is legal and that something needs to be done about it. 366 to 5 no's. I really want to know who the 5 no's were. And I think you should want to know too, as government officials. Who uses their political power to try to maintain slavery? So I would love to see how this comes out, but I think it's clear cut. It's logic. It's not based on emotion. We understand where we stand in international law. Does New Hampshire stand with human rights? That's the question. All right, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. David, could you pop one of these windows up? It's getting warm. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting warm. Yes. All right, Jason Henry.
Is someone here? Jason Henry? Okay.
Good morning, welcome to EDNA.
Good morning, everybody. Jason Henry, Superintendent, Rockingham County Jail. There's a lot to unpack here. 100% against slavery. Slavery is horrible. We take no position on this. What we're doing is just bringing forward how things actually work. New Hampshire is one of the lowest incarcerated states in the entire country. It is not, I wouldn't compare us to the South, and I agree. Indentured servitude in the South, you for $100, they put you in jail. Beggars, poors, they put them in jail. New Hampshire doesn't do that. What we're talking about here, and we're different than the state level. State level, everybody's convicted. The county level, the reason why we're here is not everybody's convicted, as one representative said. We are mainly pretrial. Pretrial individuals, They can choose to work, not work. When they're convicted inside of our facility, it does say there they're sentenced to hard labor, whatever that means. We do have work positions, as you heard here, kitchen, those kinds of things. And the way it works is, put you on detail. If you can't work for whatever reason, medical, everything else, you're fine. If you choose not to work, yes, there may be discipline issues. What happens is you get a write-up for not going to work, and then you have a due process. Your due process is you go in front of a disciplinary board to find out why you couldn't work, what's going on, and you go from there. Now, we don't put them in consolidatory of confinement in New Hampshire, and I've been around 20 plus years in New Hampshire in 3 different jails. We don't do that for somebody who doesn't want to do work in the kitchen. Okay, they come off. Now, New Hampshire is a 2/3 state where you earn your good time based upon your behavior. So can you lose some of your earned time because you don't want to work? Sure. Just like my own children. They don't want to clean their room, those kinds of things. I withhold some things from them. That happens. All right. So if it goes away, it goes away. If this is the way it wants, we don't, it's hard to say this. If it goes away, we pay our individuals some money for working, as it is. One could say, is that not enough? Maybe. But I don't want to say that we consider this as slavery. Okay, I want to make sure, no bones about it. I've been doing this long enough. Is sometimes use a rehabilitative services as well. Go down and work in the kitchen, learn how to use a kitchen skill, because maybe the individual doesn't want to do things, but sometimes we have to put them in programs. We have a lot of programs, not just work programs, but all other mental health, opioid programs. I have a 90-day in-house treatment program, and not everybody wants to go through those things. Once they're sentenced, sometimes I have to push them into those kinds of programs to help them for the rehabilitation. Corrections about rehabilitation. One of the superintendents here will talk about that in a second. So part of these can be work tools for them to become rehabilitated, to learn a skill, to move on, become a better person. We know that, especially counties is very slow, most short term, I should say. Most you're sentenced to is 1 year. Okay, that's the most you get sentenced to in a county. Anything over that, state prison. Most of our people are said pretrial, 45 days at max, they're out the door. So it's quickly revolving back in the community. Our job is just to help them, make them better wherever we can. If that means putting on a work crew, like I have a gentleman who brings them out to work on houses and those kinds of things, learn skills, that's what we put them to. But like anybody else who has a bad day, they can refuse, say, I'm not going to work today. Okay, we write them up, put them in D-board and see what happens. What's going on with you? Maybe they need mental health help. Maybe they don't belong in that crew. Okay, but there are consequences when you're sentenced, so we can try to get you along the path. Otherwise, we're just going to be warehousing people. And if we want to go back to warehousing people, then we can do that as well too. But that's my testimony.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So is it the testimony, it's, what I'm hearing is that any work component is not included in a sentence, and that is something that is policy at the corrections level. So it's not part of a sentence of time. You are going to serve X number of months, years in this facility with a structure in place for time served, time good behavior, or educational pursuits. There are those opportunities built into the sentence. But work is not, or is work built into the sentence, or is that the prerogative of the House of Corrections policy? That's what I'm.
So I guess what you can look to it for ways. It's the way it's listed now. If you're sentenced, it says you're sentenced to hard labor. Now, again, I think that was a leftover holdover from way back when. Hard labor is we're not doing breaking rocks, those sorts of things. Our hardest labor is doing some dishes in the kitchen. So that's how you get the authority to do it. As part of your sentence, it doesn't say in there when you're sentenced, you come in and you'll be sentenced to work. There's two different things. We have sentenced to work release programs. You could be sentenced to that as you come in as a recommendation. So what happens is after we assess you, those kinds of things, and you go out and you go out to do work in the community, or it could be work on campus. So there is work release programs in people's sentences. That's separate. Normally, if it's not in there, you just come in. If you're a sentenced individual, then we look at work crews we have inside. If you're not if you physically can't do it or anything along those lines, then we don't have you do it. But if you're able to work, then we use you on some of the crews. And now we're talking very small crews. We're not talking very large crews. Rockingham County, where I'm at, I have 162 inmates. I have probably 30 sentenced inmates, and out of the 30 sentenced inmates that can do some stuff, I probably have about 20 that are actually able to do, because of whatever had going on with them stuff, those are the ones, the 20 I use for kitchen, cleaning, and those kinds of things, even painting, that kind of stuff. So we're not talking large amounts of individuals to begin with, because New Hampshire's mainly is a pretrial state. We don't have a lot of truly sentenced people inside the county facilities.
May I follow up?
Follow up, sure.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. So understanding that when there is a work release, that's actually built into a sentence, that because you have to have a hearing to be approved to go forward, and support from you that
Correct.
this is a good idea. Because given your position, you could absolutely, like anyone's attorney can apply for a hearing for a work release, and you are frontline eyes on the ground, like, maybe not, maybe we don't do that, and you would be able to speak to that with authority because you're there.
Correct.
I think what we're looking at is at the if I may have misunderstood your testimony, but as a policy, right? When someone is under your supervision and they don't have a sense of work release, they are just under your supervision 24/7. There are work opportunities,
yes.
So someone can be outside of their cell or block and do something that could be of value, whether it's in the kitchen, preparing food, or in the library. There are opportunities. It's not appropriate for everyone, because some people are not ready for that opportunity. But did I hear you say that if someone refused, it's the first order of business after the, no, I'm not going to do that today, is a referral for not for a extrajudicial review, like a punishment, versus a conversation about why? It seems like the punishment comes up in the front of the conversation and then the why. So can you walk me
So
through
it wouldn't
that
be
again?
punishment up front. So say somebody, first they go through classification and a bunch of other steps to make sure they can work and that the right person or individual to work inside our facility.
Great.
They're right.
Yes.
There are some that are not appropriate to work inside a facility.
We know.
Depending on a lot of different things. And don't get me wrong, most of our workers in all my 20 plus years in New Hampshire want to work. I have very few over the years have said I'm even a sentence saying go pound sand. So we're talking very small amount of people. Just FYI, just keep it in proportional there. But if they do, and say they're sentenced, and we've told them that they're going to be a library worker, okay, and then for some reason today they say, you know what, I'm no longer being a library worker. I don't want to work. I'm done. Okay, fine. They don't go to the library. Yes, they will get a write-up. They know this. They will get here's your write-up for refusing to work. Then what happens from there is they go to a disciplinary board hearing, which is for their due process. They get to go and sit in front of all of us have a process where there's usually some sort of panel you sit in front of, and you get to tell them why you didn't want to go to work, what was going on in your life, what are the situations. You have a right to, there's a whole process. You have a right to bring witnesses, you have a right to be representative from your own side, blah, blah, blah. And so they can talk about it. And in that panel there, they listen to you, and it could be, okay, that's legitimate. You had a real bad day, you had something go on in your life, you can't do it. Maybe we didn't realize that you actually had health issues going on, so that could be an issue. Or it could just be you know what, you decided, I'm not going to listen, I'm not going to do this anymore, period, end of discussion, which that happens too. And then from that panel, we'll look at it and go, okay, what are we going to do? Well, they're sentenced to hard labor, according to the statute. And so what we're going to do is, fine, you're not going to go to work, but we're going to recommend maybe that you don't earn all of your earned time. Or, you know what, this week, you're not going to get gym time for one day. Okay, it's not large sanctions per se. All right, but now, again, come down the road, 3 months down the road from now. The individual's different. We bring them back out again and say, hey, you've been here for 3 months. You're just sitting and you're inside of a cell not doing anything. Okay, going backwards. We're going to put you back on our work crew again. Okay, how you doing? Okay, I'll go back on the work crew. They may do it, and then a few days later, they may say again, I quit, and I don't want anything to do with this. We go back to the process as well again. It's not always just this massive, people say it's punishment. And over my years, very rarely have I ever even taken away earned time from somebody on that. It's usually try to work with them. It's not as, I guess maybe it's in the South, it's maybe more prevalent, but in Hampshire at least it's not been as prevalent with an issue with these individuals, let's put it that way. So I don't see it as slavery. But they have an opportunity for a deboard process, and they always have opportunity for due process to go back and forth and work with us individually. And they have an opportunity to always write to us and work with us on all the superintendents in the counties. We just run a little differently than the state prison.
Thank you. Further questions? All right, seeing none, appreciate your testimony. Rep Wheeler, did you want to testify? I'm trying to get all the reps through first. I know you guys have schedules to keep as well, so come on up.
Thank you, Chairman Pearl, members of the Senate Executive Departments and Administration Committee, Majority Leader Carson, good to see you. I'm here today to testify in support of this constitutional amendment. CACR 13, and you guys have had a passionate conversation here. I'm glad I was able to make it. I had to come in from work, and I knew I'd be late, but hoping that there'd be people here testifying on time. And I know that you guys have heard a lot of testimony, very passionate about the issue here. For me, this is about reaffirming what New Hampshire already does in practice. New Hampshire is an amazing state, and we have a really solid Department of Corrections head, Commissioner Hanks. I'm sure all of you have had a relationship with her. She does an amazing job at bringing humanity to something that is a tough job for her, for the people that are in it. That is a tough thing. Incarceration is never easy, but New Hampshire is an example for the rest of the nation in how to do it. So for me, this legislation is about making the statement that we don't support slavery, because despite the fact that this government is good, we can't, we are all mortals, and statute, the only thing that is immortal is statute, what we decide here in this biennium. And I think that bringing this question to the ballot would be worthwhile in 2022. I got to speak sort of coincidentally. This legislation was numbered CACR 13, which is coincidental because it was in relation to the 13th Amendment. That was the first coincidence. The second coincidence was that it was put on the regular calendar for the House on February 1st of this year, so I got to speak on the House floor on February 1st of 2024, which would be 165 years to the day that, or 159 years to the day, 1865, that they passed that constitutional amendment through the United States Congress. And Senator Carson, as a history professor yourself, as someone who has, as was discussed earlier in the hearing, you know very well, like that is some of the most interesting history of this country, how that the debate that went on in the United States Congress around the amendment to slavery, passing that constitutional amendment, that was an incredible debate, and one, wherever you fall on the ideological spectrum, that's worth the political study. For me, as a political nerd, I can't claim to be a historian by any means, not anywhere near your brass. I follow it tangentially. It was a real honor to get to stand underneath the towering portrait of Abraham Lincoln and Senator John P. Hale over to my right, famed abolitionist who was Speaker of the House here in that same chamber, and speak in favor of this statement reaffirming what New Hampshire does, banning slavery here in the United States. And you never know what someone would think at the time, especially someone who was born in 1865, but I would like to think that Abraham Lincoln, who has gotten to watch all the proceedings in that House chamber, that historic House chamber, looking down at me, 21-year-old, I think I was 21 at the time, or nope, I was 20, I was 20, it was February 1st, so a month away from being 21, but a young idealistic 20-year-old with dreadlocks able to serve in that body that someone like myself wouldn't be able to serve in a long time ago, being able to speak 159 years to the day that that amendment passed through in the United States Congress. I would like to think that he would be a little bit proud about that. And nothing would fundamentally change here in New Hampshire if this were to pass the ballot in this next election. But as we're seeing in Alabama was mentioned earlier, they passed this through their legislature and put it on the ballot, and as I understand, that was passed in 2022. And I think a number of other states, 8, I think, have passed this, including southern states. And this would be a affirmation of that national movement, that sort of kicking the feds in the knee and telling them to get the work going, to reaffirm that work that Abraham Lincoln did all those years ago. He had to make an interesting compromise to save the United States. People can criticize that compromise all they want to, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know if we would be here without it. But we're here almost 200 years later with the opportunity to, in a new culture, in a new world, with the opportunity to make that compromise, to reaffirm the fact that we truly are going to end slavery and to hold up our justice there. So I think that's all I have to say. You know, the prison representatives did a good job at articulating their side, and I think we had some very passionate people describe much more passionately than I can.
Well, thank you for your testimony. We appreciate you coming in. Senator Carson for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Representative Wheeler. As I've been sitting here and listening to the discussion, I don't disagree at all. There's just a couple of points that I'd like to make, and I would agree, quite frankly, that having that particular clause in the 13th Amendment really enabled the proliferation of the Jim Crow laws in the South, as well as Plessy versus Ferguson, which I, thank goodness, the Supreme Court reversed itself in Brown versus Board of Education. But one of my real concerns is we can pass this, and it's not going to change anything here in New Hampshire. The problem is really with the federal Constitution, because I think you understand, Representative, that if there's an argument between New Hampshire's Constitution and the federal Constitution, because of the Supremacy Clause, that's what we have to follow. Do you think it would be better to work at the federal level and get this thing passed and fixed at the federal level, and then turn around and New Hampshire can do what we usually do, is incorporate that into our Constitution?
I absolutely hope that we have a better federal delegation at some point, one that doesn't take corporate money, that would be so, that would stop them from supporting things like this. I don't know if we get anywhere with them. It's hard for any regular person here, I see a lot of regular people here in the audience, to get a meeting with Senator Hassan or Senator Shaheen. We could try. But I think the easiest way for somebody in New Hampshire to do that is to come to us, because we're so open and accessible, because we're every bill has to get a hearing before our chamber. I think that's probably why people have come here, because the federal Congress, people use the term gridlock, it's not working for the American people right now. And that's clear in the legislation that they're passing. So I don't know if we'd be able to get them to do it in this instance either. I think, as somebody else said, this is about affirming. I don't think New Hampshire is going to be seceding anytime soon. New Hampshire stands on its own, despite the fact that we're in the United States of America, and our Constitution stands on its own very uniquely, and we debate that all the time here in our body, and we hear about that all the time in the Criminal Justice Committee, and I'm sure the same for you in Senate Judiciary. I think it's important that our Constitution say that slavery is wrong and we don't support it, and that would help push the federal government more so than any petition or meeting with the senator could do. And hopefully, eventually, we have a federal delegation from all corners of this state that would listen to the people and push this through the federal Congress. But as I understand, they're not co-sponsoring it right now.
Okay. May I
follow up? Sure.
So, I've lost the question. I'll talk to you.
Okay,
sounds good.
Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thanks for coming in today. Appreciate your testimony. Ophelia. I believe it's, I'm not going to try the last name. I'll let you tell us. Sorry, can't quite read it. Burnett, maybe? Yes. All right, I did get it. Okay, thank you. Good morning, welcome to EDNA.
Good morning. All right, so kind of overwhelmed with everything that I was hearing today. I'm trying to get all my thoughts together, but I'm happy I have others that are here, other organizers and advocates and experts that can go over some of the things that you guys had questioned about. But I just wanted to say really quick that Senator Carson, I know that you mentioned if this is something that we should take up on a federal level, but you know, it's going to take 38 states to pass this law for us to be able to take it to the federal level. So why not start here in New Hampshire, like everyone was mentioning? 8 states has already passed it. This year, 14 more states are proposing this type of bill. So we're trying to keep that going so that we can bring it to the federal level. And I just don't understand why in 2024 we're still trying to have a conversation on ending slavery in New Hampshire. It's pretty plain and simple. Like, slavery is not something that we should stand by. The U.S. Constitution is the land of the law, so whatever the 13th Amendment says, it goes across the entire country. So if it's something that we want to change in our state, which is why we're all here today, we have to amend the New Hampshire Constitution. And I know most of us know that it's not, the slavery language is not in the New Hampshire Constitution. So with that being said, our Constitution gets defaulted to the exact language of the 13th Amendment, and you guys all know what the 13th Amendment says. Pretty much that slavery is abolished, except if being convicted of a crime, then you're considered a slave. So we're trying to change that so we can change it federally. So I'm going to try to quickly go over my testimony that I had written, but I just wanted to address some of those issues that you guys had brought up. My name is Ophelia Burnett, and I'm the Healing Justice Program Associate with American Friends Service Committee. I am here today in support of CAR 13 and to urge you to vote ought to pass in this important bill. Do we agree that slavery needs to be abolished? Slavery was supposed and have ended with the end of the Civil War and the creation of the 13th Amendment, a promise that this great nation will no longer put someone in chains and hold them in captivity. Sorry, I shouldn't be chewing gum while doing this. The promise came with an exception, but not just at the federal level. Many of our New Hampshire citizens are not aware of the slavery and involuntary servitude still exists in our state, but it's true. The 13th Amendment clearly states neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except of a punishment of crime, shall ever be tolerated in this state. It's this particular loophole that New Hampshire, just like many states, has never drafted a bill to abolish. Nobody should be subjected to slavery because of being convicted of a crime. As individuals with very life experience, we agree on many things, but what I believe in my heart is that my fellow New Hampshire residents don't want us to continue to be a slave state. Maybe you're thinking it's just words on a really old document and not actually a practice we uphold on an everyday basis. It's astonishing that in the 21st century, we still find ourselves discussing the need to eradicate this vile institution from our midst. But the truth is the fight against slavery is a battle that we must continue to wage until every last trace of this injustice is eradicated from our great state. My mission in life is not to advocate for formerly and currently incarcerated individuals, but to help restore human rights to all human beings because of the atrocities I witnessed firsthand and suffered while incarcerated. Incarceration is marketed as a mechanism to rehabilitate someone so they can be a productive citizen, but the culture of prison only creates or exacerbates many of the reasons people end up there. So many human beings go into the system suffering from all forms of mental illness. It could be from drug abuse, childhood trauma, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse. The effects of abject poverty or the combination of all the above. One, they are released from the prison. It can be extremely difficult to acclimate themselves into the outside world. It can be compared to being dropped off in another country where you don't know the language, but you're expected to figure it out with little to no help. Far too many are frightened, and they end up back in the hell where they wanted to escape. It's called recidivism, but it's also being coined as post-incarceration syndrome. The narrative is that someone is merely a repeat offender or a career criminal, but what they may actually be is an impoverished, abused child, turned offender, turned abused by the state, enslaved adult. Everyone needs to be held accountable for their wrongdoings. This also includes the state. I'm almost done. What we the people are attempting to do, not just here, but in 8 other states across the country, is advocate for empathy and radical change in how we rehabilitate and help our fellow human beings become productive citizens who can be held accountable for their actions without being exploited, abused, or killed. This cycle will not end until there is nothing to gain financially from other person's life being destroyed. We the people will not rest until any and all financial incentives to incarcerate and discontinued and erased from America economics. We will begin our work with the president that created this monster in the first place, the constitutional exception clause of criminality. So let us not forget the legacy we leave for future generations, one that either perpetuates the horrors of the past or paves the way for a brighter future and more inclusive future. There is no such thing as tough or soft on crime. We are either pro-slavery and choose not to accept a bill abolishing slavery and involuntary servitude in its entirety, or we are anti-slavery and we fix our community by accepting the bill to abolish slavery and involuntary servitude, recognize the humanity in each of us. I respectfully ask that you approve this bill and go on record to abolish slavery in its entirety. We can't reform a prison system whose roots are slavery and involuntary servitude.
Thank you for your testimony. Question, Senator Carson.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Burnett. It's good to see you here.
Good to see you, Tim.
You had mentioned that there are 8 other states that are considering this.
Yes.
Do you know if those states are within New England?
Vermont.
Okay, so it's New Hampshire and Vermont here in New England.
Yes, Vermont has already passed it, which is one of the New England states, and New Hampshire that is proposing this bill that hasn't passed it yet, but hopefully we will this year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions?
I just had one more thing. I have testimony from Black Lives Matter New Hampshire that I want to pass out to you guys after.
Okay. Yep, you can give it to Edie there. Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Tim Lethbridge.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Tim Lethbridge. I'm the Superintendent of the Grafton County House of Corrections.
Good morning. Welcome to ED&A.
Thank you. I'm certainly not here in support of slavery. My recommendation would be to pass this bill, to put before the voters this constitutional amendment, but to mirror exactly the language of the United States 13th Amendment. I've heard from supporters that this will have no impact on the state. My concern is we will have no idea what impact it will have on the state because the language is broad and vague, and the courts will at a later point decide. And in that deciding, we'll have unintended consequences. Will the courts decide that any inmate working needs to be paid minimum wage? Do we need to do a salary study to see what an inmate on the outside would be making for performing similar work inside the jail? All inmates, including those who are not inmate workers, are required to make their bunks and keep their cell areas tidy. Is that involuntary servitude? The courts would determine that as well. Would the jails need to have housekeeping daily from paid maids to maintain cells? It's an extreme example, but none of these things would be determined in the legislation or in the constitutional amendment. If these are areas that the state would like to address, my recommendation would be to address it through legislation, through the deliberative process of legislating, and make those decisions for exactly how the jails in New Hampshire should operate. In Grafton County, we still operate a traditional county farm. As part of the rehabilitation efforts, inmates do work in the county farm. The shifts are not more than 8 hours. There are numerous agricultural jobs going wanting in our community that we're providing job training for in that operation, while also providing food for the jail and the county nursing home. With the broad and vague language of the constitutional amendment, without the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution's exemption, my fear is, as a jail and as a jail superintendent, I'd be very hesitant to put any inmate to work and recommend to the county commissioners that all of those inmates be replaced with paid staff. That would certainly be the safest avenue for me to operate in and leave me least liable for a civil rights lawsuit.
Questions from the committee? Your mic's on. I wasn't sure if you might. All right, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
I'm going to try this one. Griselli? Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to pronounce that. Thank you so much for the help. Good morning and welcome to EDNA. Turn your mic on, please. There you go.
Okay. My name is Griselli Glenn, and I'm going to just go over a couple of things that I have here before reading my testimony. I want to define involuntary servitude. And involuntary servitude is a condition where a person is forced to work against their will with little control over their working conditions. Now, I heard corrections up here, speak up here and, try to justify that the inmates do get disciplined if they refuse to work. That's point blank bottom line. If you don't feel good, if I'm incarcerated and I have my time of the month that day and I have to go and do a work detail, if I refuse, I will get written up, and the consequences of that are to be determined upon the due process hearing and all those things that take place. But nonetheless, I don't have a choice in the matter. I have to go to work whether I feel good or I don't feel good, whether my mom was mean to me on the phone or I'm having a bad day or I miss my kids. Doesn't matter. I have to go to work. And according to their own rules, I have, which in the county handbooks and their rules pretty much mirror each other when it comes to discipline. And I have from Belknap County that shows it shows one of the things that you can get reprimanded for, and it says refusal to work. This is the Belknap County Department of Corrections inmate handbook, and like I said, the other counties for the most part mirror each other. And on number 14 of the list of things that you can get in trouble for, refusal to do or complete an assigned detail is one of them. And then the punishment for that can be any of the following sanctions. Can be loss of any or all of your good time accrued, loss of any privileges, including visits, educational programs, AA, NA, GED, etc., transfer to a segregation of another housing unit with a 30-day review for continued nonconformance, cell confinement or indefinite lockup, transfer to a higher classification level, administrative segregation, additional work details, restitution for damages if that happens, restitution for costs incurred, formal, and the list goes on. But these are the punishments that you get for refusing to go to work or not do a work detail. This doesn't mean clean your cell, make your bed. That's not what it's referring to. And those same rules apply for the New Hampshire State Prison as well. You refuse to do your work detail, you will be written up. You could be lugged. You could go to classification. You could go to awaiting a hearing. All of these things happen on a daily basis in our Department of Corrections. So I would like to correct the people that up here and said that they don't, that we don't have this going on in New Hampshire. We most certainly do have this going on in New Hampshire. And as we hear people up here speak, they're defending it. We have people defending this. People, and as a part of their sentence, when you are sentenced by the courts, I have the form that the judge fills out when you get sentenced here. That's from the State New Hampshire Judicial Branch, form number 2115 SE, which the judge fills out when you're sentenced to the state prison. And nowhere in any of these sentences does it say that you are sentenced to hard labor. You are not sentenced to hard labor. Maybe back in 1965 you were sentenced to hard labor, but not in 2024. So involuntary servitude is when you're made to do something that you don't want to do. You're forced to do it, and that's what is going on in our county jails and in our prison. This obviously affects the prison more so because there's people that are doing more than a year, whereas the county jail is a year or less time served that you're serving. So when you're in the prisons, we know, like she said earlier, the license plates, the license plates that New Hampshire is profiting off of for the work that the inmates are doing. The inmates are the ones that are putting that work, that are making those license plates so that New Hampshire can get them at cost for $1.20 a plate, and then to turn around and sell them to the New Hampshire citizens for anywhere as low as $8 up to $40-something, even $50 off of one license plate. So it is most certainly happening here. Not only that, the reality is, with or without this being in place, the inmates are going to work. You're not going to need to hire paid staff to do the tasks that they are doing right now. Because the fact of the matter is, they want to get out of that cell at any cost. So if they have to go and clean, wipe down the table, or go down to the law library, or work in the kitchen, you best believe that they're going to do that. But as far as using it as this task, as this is rehabilitating, no, it is not rehabilitating, because you don't get a choice in the matter, like I said. Also, I wanted to just say, give an excerpt from a testimony that was written by Albert Buzz Schur, who is, he is a professor at UNH. He was a public defender for 13 years in New Hampshire, representing over 2,000 clients on everything from juvenile to homicide. And as such, he worked with the police, prosecutors, jailers, mental health professionals on a regular basis. And he has been on the faculty at UNH for 27 years. Relevant to his testimony, the part that I'm going to read, is the foundational course of criminal procedure that examines police investigative conduct on the context of U.S. and New Hampshire constitutions, somewhat fondly known as cops, robbers, and the Constitution. And the paragraph I want to quote, it says, "A work culture devoid of diversity makes it that much easier to never confront the realities of what it is to be a person of color in the criminal justice system. It makes it that much more likely than any remedies to racial profiling, even implementing by the most powerful players in the criminal justice system, will fall by the wayside in the pursuit of convictions." And that's the reality of our state and what goes on in our criminal justice system. And with that, I also wanted to quote something from the ACLU research report that they have out, and is about prison labor and the roots of the modern day labor programs that can be traced to ends of the Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery, quote unquote, except as a punishment for crime. The states in the North and the South turned to incarcerated labor as a means of partially replacing chattel slavery and the free labor force slavery provided. As state correction systems expanded, so too did the number of state-sponsored incarceral labor programs, which is involuntary servitude that we have today. Lastly, I would like to read my testimony. It's not that long, so I won't torture you too much longer. Okay, before I do that, I want to also read what we have enshrined in the New Hampshire Constitution, and that's Article 10, where it says, "Government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or the emolument of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted and public liberty manifestly endangered, and all other means of redress are ineffectual, the people may, and of right ought to reform the old, or establish a new government. The doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind." And that was from 1784, June 2nd, 1784. And I'm here today to say that how dare we, the people of New Hampshire, known for our state motto, live free or die, have not drawn a clear line to demonstrate which side of slavery and involuntary servitude we stand on. We have not made it clear that we will not support, condone, or accept slavery or involuntary servitude of any kind. Slavery and involuntary servitude were said to have been abolished in 1865, or was it? It wasn't if it was an exception clause in the 13th Amendment. The exception was a way to continue enslaving blacks without making it appear as that what was being done. Those practices have been embedded in the very core of our society, a way to justify slavery and involuntary servitude. We, the people, have allowed this to go on for far too long. I'm taking a stance and I'm stating that the reason that we are here today should be clear. You are either anti-slavery or you are pro-slavery. You are either anti-involuntary servitude, being forced to do something that you don't want to do, or you are for or you are against it. There is not an in-between. There is no discussion that needs to be had. How can we proudly say that we are the live free or die state, all the while making an exception to slavery? The answer is that we can't. There are no exceptions, period.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Senator Carson with a question.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
You had mentioned an ACLU report.
Yes.
Are you able to supply the committee with a copy of that report?
Sure.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Anthony Payton. Good morning. Welcome to EDNA.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm Anthony Payton. I had a nice Google document prepared. I used Grammarly, had semicolons and everything. It was really good. But the fact that the people before me used everything that I was going to say underscores how easy this should be. You're looking at someone who is, I'm probably one of the many faces in this state of post-incarceration success. So I'll go with implications and respect. I think if you remove the word slavery from this and you put in, say, Holocaust or anything along those lines, we probably wouldn't be sitting here. And as someone who's been inside, one thing I know is that language matters. It matters. And I've been at every level of incarceration. I believe the RAND Society says that for $1 spent to incarcerate someone, you save 5 putting in education and employment skills. Now, not to jump off topic, but what I'll say is this, so I can give you good impact. To the ladies in here, you get arrested for whatever. You walk into the prison. A correction officer tries to force himself upon you. That has happened. I left FCI Danbury, Connecticut. The woman wound up pregnant. It was not Mary and Jesus. She wound up pregnant for a reason. The male guard went in there, had sex with her. She wound up pregnant. I don't know if you feel comfortable if your family member is in a place where the word slavery and servitude is still being used. So the guys in here, you have a relative or something that just went to prison, a woman, for whatever reason. She calls home, you speak to her. She says, this guy is forcing himself on me. I don't know what to do. Do you really feel comfortable with her in a place that still uses words like slavery and servitude? And so when it comes down to it, I believe respect is huge when it comes to using that word slavery. We're in America. We told ourselves as the greatest country in the world, right? So why are we even in here having this conversation? Why are we fighting against it? Now, I've heard people that came before me from both sides of the aisle, and some good points were made. But at the end of the day, we're using the word slavery and in servitude, talking about incarcerated, vulnerable, marginalized people. And if we want them to return to society, to be sitting in here before you and bringing up laws like some of the people behind me and doing the right thing, then we need to have a little bit more respect for all of our citizens. Because I believe as it stands now, that word should be removed, that there's no reason for it to be in there. Find a better word. We would do it if there were other groups of people, we would do it. And so I would like to end with that, especially these people have made some great points. And again, like I said, this is about history here in America. American history, slavery, servitude. I don't care where it's at, south, north, wherever it is. Those words should never be used in any document. First of all, it's primitive and archaic. So just to remove it should not be an issue. And with that, I'll step back.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, we appreciate your testimony today. Doug, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce the last name from Cheshire County. I'm going to let you do it.
That's okay. You're not alone.
I suspect I'm.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Pearl and committee members, for hearing this testimony. My name is Doug Yazway. I'm the Superintendent of Cheshire County Department of Corrections and representing the County Corrections Superintendent Affiliate. Apologize for my voice. I'm at the tail end of a cold. I feel better than I sound, and it's not COVID. The New Hampshire County Superintendent Affiliate is principally supportive, certainly, of CACR 13 and agree that slavery and involuntary servitude have no place in the state of New Hampshire. We do, as you've heard, have some significant concern about the current language in the concurrent resolution, specifically that unlike the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, there's no language that provides an exception for punishment for persons convicted and serving a period of incarceration. The policies and practices surrounding slavery and indentured servitude in our country's history in the 17th, 18th centuries, and the policies and practices that occur with work and the jobs assigned to inmates within our jails are vastly and unmistakably distinct and in many ways incomparable. Enslaved individuals were innocent persons that were subject to horrendous abuse and mistreatment and forced labor with no pay and no personal benefit. Incarcerated persons, for the most part, are not victims and should not be treated as such. The vast majority of inmates that work are not only willing, but are happy and excited to do so. Further, they do gain a rehabilitative benefit from the experience. In county corrections, as you've heard, we do assign work to convicted and sentenced offenders only, who are not otherwise exempt due to medical risks or restrictions or mental health risks or restrictions. Inmates that are unable to work due to physical or mental incapacity are not required to work. A number of studies have shown that employed inmates have fewer disciplinary infractions and do get better employment once released. Most of the jobs in the DOCs provide an opportunity for positive interaction with civilian kitchen, laundry, and facility workers. These interactions are helpful and provide opportunities for growth and a chance to learn a valuable trade. Certainly, these jobs and vocational opportunities provide a greater rehabilitative benefit than the general alternative that happens in jail. Hour after hour of TV, basketball, cards, and gambling or weightlifting are not rehabilitation. At times, we use extra duty or work as a consequence of a disciplinary offense. This practice also occurs at the New Hampshire State Prison. It's not unlike what happens in cases of juvenile diversion and in some cases of adult diversion as an alternative sanction in our state's drug and treatment courts. Punishment is a commonly accepted function of our correctional system. In the last 10 to 15 years, modern corrections has come a long way from the war on drugs mentality in which our criminal justice system heavily valued and overemphasized punishment. As evidence of a changing field is the fact that my education and professional background is not in law enforcement or corrections, but rather I'm a clinical social worker, licensed up until a year ago when I was no longer practicing for over 35 years. I have used my position as an opportunity to continue to constantly advocate for progressive, research-based, innovative policies and practices. Corrections, especially in New Hampshire, is constantly evolving. We are developing innovative and multidisciplinary informed policies and approaches that balance punishment with opportunities for treatment and rehabilitation. All inmates deserve to be treated with respect, understanding, and compassion. No one should be treated as we treated enslaved persons in our past. However, as a clinician and a social worker, I recognize, and I think most of you and many in our criminal justice system would recognize, that some individuals are less ready to change at the outset. Some offenders have not yet internalized the requisite motivation, insight, and skills needed to make healthy, law-abiding choices. We are in the business, ultimately, of human behavior change. We know that punishment, structure, and at times external motivation will create an initial impetus for gradual internal change. Our criminal justice and correctional systems have the ability to impact and influence behavior through some degree of external control and influence. It's fundamental to what we do in many ways in corrections, and it's fundamental to human behavior change, at least of any significance. Most of us change initially based on some external potential or actual consequence, and we gradually, if we learn to make healthy choices, we internalize those choices. In modern corrections, we take pride in the multidisciplinary approach, and we do a better job than ever at treating each offender as a unique individual. Thank you for allowing my brief digression into human behavior change and the research around that. I'll come to the point. We have many tools in our correctional toolbox. The ability to require work for some offenders that might not otherwise choose it is one of those tools. I ask you to please not take away this tool. An amendment to the current language that would allow an exception for punishment for persons convicted and serving a period of incarceration would resolve this concern. In closing, I'm a practicing social worker, as I said, for over 35 years. I assure you that the work that convicted persons are assigned in jails is done so humanely, and it provides a valuable rehabilitative function. On behalf of the superintendent affiliate, I ask you not to confuse this with the slavery and indentured servitude of our past. Please recognize the important and valuable correctional tool that it is, and trust that in New Hampshire, it is practiced in a respectful and professional manner. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. Philosophically, I am right with you as far as how skill building and access to work is a necessary component of rehabilitation and shouldn't be used as a punishment. So I think we're on the same page there. Is maybe the disconnect and the way to connect these disparate ways of looking at this perhaps missing from the sentencing, that rather than being a policy that is perhaps different at each county HOC, that if we were to include the possibility of work as part of incarceration, then maybe we wouldn't have this issue.
It is part of sentencing guidelines in New Hampshire.
But not everybody, it's not issued in the sentence itself, which I think is the crux here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that leaves you in a weird space where, is that where policy could use the support of that sentencing?
Mm-hmm. Potentially,
Yeah.
I can see.
Would that be helpful?
I can see your point.
To the execution of your programming, which is important.
Mm-hmm. I see your point.
Thank you.
I will say I had the same question written down, so you beat me to it, thank you. Further questions? All right, seeing none, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
Senator Perkins Cuoco would like to testify or read a statement on behalf of someone who isn't able to testify today, so Senator, we'll turn that to you.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to read a statement on behalf of Representative Charlotte DiLorenzo, who is a representative in my district and couldn't join us today. Honorable members of the Senate Executive Departments and Administration Committee, I write in support of CACR 13 relating to slavery and involuntary servitude, providing that slavery and involuntary servitude shall be prohibited in the state of New Hampshire. According to the sponsors of CACR 13, the New Hampshire Constitution does not explicitly prohibit slavery or involuntary servitude. If the amendment is adopted, the New Hampshire Constitution will prohibit slavery and involuntary servitude. According to Caroline M. Kiesel, Associate Professor in DePaul University's School of Continuing and Professional Studies, passed by Congress on January 31st, 1865, and ratified later that year, the 13th Amendment outlawed slavery across the nation with a key loophole, except as punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. According to Kissel, this paved the way for the country's burgeoning prison labor system and the world's largest prison population at 2.3 million in 2020. Penal labor, prison labor camps, and convict leasing programs represent the legacy of bondage we are grappling with today. Carolyn Kissel, Washington Post, January 27, 2001. The passage of CACR 13 will close the slavery loophole, outlawing enslavement once and for all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Altshuler, you also had a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am Senator Altshuler from District 24, and I am reading into the record a letter on behalf of Emma Galinas from Dover, who is from the district of one of the co-sponsors, Senator Waters. So, dear Senator Howard Pearl, Senator Sharon Carson, and members of the Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, my name is Emma Galinas, and I'm a social worker from Dover, New Hampshire, who is deeply passionate about providing care and disrupting systems of oppression. As a listener to the voices of individuals with direct experience, I can attest to the deleterious and multifaceted impact of incarceration on marginalized communities. At present, the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution contains an exception clause permitting the use of slavery and involuntary servitude as a punishment for crime. In the United States, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately represented in the carceral system and are frequently subjected to compulsory labor. As evidenced above, our language wields power and has the capacity to devastate or empower communities. If passed, CACR 13 can achieve the latter and unveil one of the many masks that slavery wears. Without language in our state constitution that empowers communities and explicitly denounces slavery, we remain complicit. I urge the committee to extend their support to CACR 13 as an act of community love and care. Thank you for your consideration. Kind regards, Emma Galinas, MSW, Dover, New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Daley, is there anyone else on the sign-up sheet over there? Okay. All right, that is all I have on the sheet. Is there?
I missed the sign-up sheet.
Okay, well, come on up. I was going to ask. Is anybody else? So...
Thank you.
Turn your mic on and please introduce yourself.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, members of the committee. Very much appreciate the opportunity to testify today. I didn't expect to, but I just wanted to raise a few points in response to some of the concerns that have been presented. Again, Gilles Bissonnette, Legal Director of the ACLU of New Hampshire. We support this CACR. And I just want to be very clear. I have immense respect for superintendents, the county jail superintendents behind me. We've, in fact, worked on bills together in the past, but I did want to just articulate some of our feedback to some of the things that we've heard from those speakers. The superintendents did acknowledge that they will require people to work even if not voluntary, and that people will be written up and disciplined if they do not work. And I think what this CACR really does is present the policy question of whether that is okay or not. I really think that's what this is at its core for this committee to consider. And I know that, one may not want to call that involuntary servitude, and I understand that, but I do think it fits that definition when you look at that definition as meaning forced work against one's will. And I think from the ACLU's perspective, we view that as problematic just for all the reasons that prior speakers conveyed, because I think it, at its core, dismisses the human dignity of those individuals who are incarcerated. I do want to be very clear, if the committee thinks there needs to be some definitional work around the term involuntary servitude, I know Senator Carson kind of raised that, we'd be happy to be a part of that process. I would note, though, that this language is very similar, as prior speakers said, to the eight or so other states that have put this in their constitution. And there is also a definition of involuntary servitude that courts have used in interpreting the 13th Amendment. So there are tools available if this committee thinks a definition is required, though I would just again note that the many other states that have done this have not provided that level of granular definition in their constitution. I'm also just not entirely sure we've seen concrete indication from jail superintendents that this would significantly impact their operations, especially what I think is the acknowledgement that this would probably impact a small number of folks who maybe decide not to work, because there are a lot of incentives in place when people are in jail to work, credit, pay, et cetera. So I just wanted to highlight that. And lastly, I would just convey the notion that our federal constitution, the 13th Amendment, is really just a floor on rights. We have the ability as an independent sovereign state to grant rights in our constitution that go beyond that. And I actually think that's exactly what we would be doing here if this committee thought it appropriate to move forward with CACR 13. And I hope it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Carson with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, Mr.
Good morning,
President.
Senator. It's good to see you.
It's interesting to see you here as opposed to Senator.
I know. It's like thrown me off. I'm so used to
Yeah.
saying Chairwoman Carson. So. Thank you.
Earlier, a woman spoke and
Sure.
she talked about a report that was done, and I
Yeah.
asked her to send it to us. Could you make sure we get a copy of it?
100%, Senator, of course.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator.
All right, last chance. Anybody else who wants to testify on, CACR 13? And seeing none, we're going to close the hearing.
Can we take a break so we can go to the bathroom?
We'll take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll come back and go into exec session.
Okay.
recess, and
Senator Bradley and I were in there.
I will take a motion to go into exec.
So moved.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have 2 Senate bills I would like to get exec today, and that will wrap up our Senate bill work. Senate Bill 373, I think Senator Carson has a motion.
I move on to pass.
We have a second?
Second?
And I know Senator Carson has an amendment she wants
Yes,
to present.
I have an amendment. It is Amendment 1224F.
Do we have that?
You should.
Wait.
You should. Matthew, I checked with Matthew this morning. He told me that everybody had it.
24S.
One for yesterday for 1003, HB 1003.
Yeah, no, I checked with Matthew this morning.
I do not have it.
I don't have it.
Oh, Jesus, okay. Well,
Edie, can you make us copies real quick?
yeah,
It'll only take just a second. Why don't you go ahead and keep explaining it if you want to?
okay. I had been reached out from the home builders that they wanted an amendment that dealt specifically with adjusting the maximum air exchange rate in new homes from the current threshold of 3 air exchanges per hour to no more than 5. And really, this speaks to the critical component of maintaining the health, comfort, and safety of home environments. We all know homes tend to accumulate a lot of pollutants, whether it's dust, dander, pollen, other types of organic and chemical compounds. And having more of an air exchange will keep the homes healthier. Oh, I'm not answering. As you can tell, my voice is kind of, and that's because of dander, dust and dander in my home. Our thing has been a little offline, and we're waiting for it to be fixed. And because of this accumulation, this happens. So I said that I would bring the amendment in, and you can see by the amendment, it is really going to be amending the International Energy Conservation Code that they'll be tested for air leakage, and it makes that change that the home builders are requesting. It's really about the health, not only of the building, but the people that are occupying it.
So just for clarification, this is a replace all for the entire bill.
Oh, no. Oh,
yeah,
place.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that, make sure we all understood that.
I did not. Hang on a second. 373. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, you can't put the other one. It's not your, that's you. You have the chair's mic, that's why.
I have the chair's mic.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, I don't know how to operate this yet.
do I
We
have
gotta win
yours?
more seats. So I was just gonna ask, I know that there's a parallel bill dealing with this subject matter in the House. Do any of you guys happen to have an update on where that stands at the moment?
So that has, I believe, come to us now. I believe it was assigned to us last night, but I've not had a chance to review it. But
Okay.
not personally, but my understanding is that everyone seems to be agreeable to the changes that were made in the House, at least what I've heard from the stakeholders. So
Okay.
they all seem to feel it hit what it needed to. So I've not heard any concerns raised with it as of yet.
Okay.
So that's the reason we were holding this bill, was in
Okay.
case there were concerns from the House version, and my understanding is that they're okay with it.
All right, you don't happen to know the bill number?
Kevin, it was assigned to us last night. We had 6 bills assigned to us last night.
Okay.
And I believe that is one of them. But I
believe it's HB 1387.
That sounds right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I
If
appreciate
I'm
that.
mistaken, then I apologize, but I
No
believe that
worries.
is the bill.
I was just going to take a quick look at it while we're talking.
Okay, if I may,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Senator
Sure, there's other information that I've received. The CDC recommends 5 air changes per hour. The EPA does, the American Lung Association, Harvard Public Health, the WHO organization, NPR also weighed in on this, and CBS News also weighed in on this. So I think we're in a good place, and we have that other bill. So I think, I would hope that you could all vote for amendment number 1224S.
Senator Altshuler?
Yes. So, Senator Carson, love this. Love almost everything about it.
The operative word is
Almost.
You have-
Almost. I love
It's just the
almost
effective-
everything about it. In fact, it's just like chef's kiss, except for the part on line 1 where it says replace all. So perhaps we have a slew of testimony in our folders, and also I'm sure you all have received the emails as well, that we're not pushing forward on the building codes actually endangers New Hampshire's ability to access some federal funds, which the Department of Energy has already submitted letters of intent to apply for. And in fact, the day that we heard this, Senator Rosenwald was sitting in that day, and we got some communications from Senator Shaheen's office, outlining that it would make it more difficult for municipalities to be empowered to update their own codes if we restrict them back to the 2018s. And the Inflation Reduction Act put a whole bunch of money out on the table that we should be able to, that we shouldn't leave out. We shouldn't leave on the table. I think that that's just bad policy to restrict municipalities from possibly accessing funds. And, you don't have to go up to those building codes right now, but that's the max. So I would hope that we could take this really great amendment, which we're all about, and make it an add-on to the definition, or to Senate Bill 373.
So, Senator, I understand your concerns with the energy policy portions. As you know, this bill was put in by Senator Abrams kind of as a placeholder in case House Bill 1387 went belly up and things went in bad directions. So we kind of have it as an opportunity to have a vehicle to use it for something else like this amendment, because we can have this conversation that you want to on the House Bill 1387, which deals with all of the codes that are coming over, at least if I have the right bill number, which I believe I do. I think that conversation perhaps would be more appropriate when we're discussing House Bill 1387, and I think this, Senate Bill 373 was there for a specific purpose, and it doesn't appear that we need it for that purpose, and I think repurposing it to the amendment that Senator Carson brought in is a good idea, and that the conversation you'd like to have could be done on House Bill 1387. Or whatever, 1387. I'm trying to read over, and I know you wrote it down.
Well, yeah, I think.
Or is it 1059? You have two written down.
I think it might be 1059.
Okay, my apologies if I'm mistaken.
No, it's fine. And I just want to clarify, the reason I asked the question is because I do share some of the concerns Senator Altshuler raised. I also have, I differ slightly just from feedback from the housing community, but what's important is to have the conversation if there's going to be some updates. And 1059, as introduced, had some important changes. So the status on our general court website is not quite updated.
Sorry, 1059 or 359?
1059.
Sorry, I wrote the wrong one.
Well, my apologies if I had the
1059. No worries.
Not at all.
We received it last night.
We haven't gotten it yet then, 10:59.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm looking at the docket, and they did amend it, and it was voted 306 to pass with amendment number 0804H. So they did pass it. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
So it was
Yes.
passed.
Okay.
It's going to be coming to us.
Well, my feeling is one of these bills,
All right.
we'll have the opportunity to have that conversation.
So admittedly, I am not familiar with 1059, and are you telling me that 1059 brings the building code up to 2021?
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, I'm furiously trying to call.
fellow senator, and it does seem to bring most codes up to 2021, including the International Building Code, the existing building code.
Senator Carson?
Thank you. We did an incredible amount of work on the building codes and creating a system for the introduction of the building codes. We were at one point, I would say 6 or 7 years behind, just because nobody wanted to do this. So between Representative McGuire, who chaired House EDA, and myself, who chaired Senate EDA, we came up with a system that we were always going to be 2 years behind.
Right.
Because we have to, there are serious implications, especially for people that own businesses. Even your home, if it's not built up to date, it can seriously affect the insurance rate you pay. So we realized that, and we created a system. So hopefully from now on, when this committee gets building codes, they're always going, you can make the assumption they're always going to be 2 years behind, because we have to do that. We have to keep up. So hopefully, Senator, that will answer your question.
Yeah, I've got 1059 up, and that makes perfect sense now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay.
So further discussion on the amendment.
Get up on my
No,
during
I
our
know, I have to go in
conversation.
the docket.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because I'm looking to see if I can actually see the bill.
And I'm supportive of this amendment as well, the one that we are currently actually bringing today.
Further discussion on the amendment? Are we ready to vote? All right, all in favor of amendment 1224S? Did we move the amendment yet? Did we move in second?
Move the amendment, and then, just in case.
All right, let's move it again. Senator
Okay,
Carson
I
moves,
move ought to pass.
moves the amendment 1224S.
Second.
And seconded by Senator Perkins Spilker. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, I move
Go ahead.
ought to pass is amended.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Senator Carson, would you like to take this out?
No,
Consent?
I'd like to move consent.
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now would you like to?
Yes, I will.
All
take
right.
this out. We'll get there eventually.
Yes, sorry, I got one step ahead of myself. All right, and Senate Bill 481. I know Senator Perkins Spilker has an amendment.
All right, hold on.
I do.
Would you like to move it for purposes of discussion?
I would like to move it for purpose of discussion. I move ought to pass on Senate Bill 481.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Senator Perkins Spilker, you have an amendment you'd like to?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'd like to move Amendment 1330S, and I will speak to it if there's a second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Thank you. So, and I find myself with every bill folder except my bill folder for this bill. But
Would you like mine?
no,
Doesn't
it's
say
fine. It's fine. I was just pulling up a copy of the date. So, I do want to thank the chair. I think, you know, we've had ongoing conversations about this bill and how to handle it. My amendment is actually here to try to address some of the concern raised, which is the financial piece. So I was able to talk to some members of the State Employees Union, and so the amendment in front of you is intended to move the effective date out far enough into July 1st, 2025, that if we were to pass SB 481 and make it a state holiday, it would become part of the next collective bargaining round. And so I know the concern was sort of the cost of it, which I feel like I've heard enough information to know we just can't be certain of what that cost is at this time. But since that was something that was raised, we thought if we can move forward with making it a state holiday, it can be part of the collective bargaining. I don't know if that will be enough to address all concerns, but it was certainly intended towards that end. And I'm hopeful that you can be supportive.
Well, I appreciate the effort. I am the one who raised the cost concern because I was surprised that adding a state holiday didn't have a fiscal note on the bill. And,
yes.
And as I discussed with the committee previously, there was a fiscal note prepared, and why it didn't get included, I'm still not clear on. And I It still is a concern of mine, because I just don't understand how we add a state holiday, even if it's part of collective bargaining, how we add it without having some cost. And so that is and still remains a concern for me. And I do appreciate your effort with the amendment. I think I'll be challenged to support it for that reason, because I still am concerned about the fiscal impact.
Can I speak to it too?
Senator General, yes.
I want to be super respectful, because I understand why we bring it forward. I sat in on the hearing for the House with the old man of the mountain. That did not, actually it was shot down. So the first time it came around. And the argument was, we've got Memorial Days, we've got, and I forget all of the discussion, but we've got this for that and that for this. And I certainly appreciate the reason bringing it forward. If we could just do it as a day of remembrance, that would be one thing. But to have a financial piece to it, that concerns me. People don't get the day off when it's May 3rd for Old Man of the Mountain Day. It's a day of remembrance. And I know I want to be sympathetic and respectful for those in Texas that finally realized that they were free, and it was June 19th. But we also have Emancipation Proclamation. We also have another day, that at least one, that we have the day off, and it's celebrated, Martin Luther King Day and some others. So with that standpoint, I can't support this. So.
Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also have some difficulty with this. I think it just needs some more work and some more fine tuning. And a lot of it has to do with the fiscal aspect of it. I understand that. I think this might have a high hurdle to get over, and Senator Gendreau spoke to this about how difficult it is to get these days. And I would like it to be in the best possible place it can be in order to be passed. And I'm asking if we can do one day for next year, with the intent that work is going to be done to get this to the place it needs to be. And I'm wondering, because we tend to combine days, can we combine it and make it, honoring the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth, and recognize the both of them, because both of those dates should be honored. They're both extremely important. The Emancipation Proclamation was really the catalyst for looking at the eventual freedom of all slaves. And June 19th is the culmination when people find, yes, we're free. So is there a way to combine the two into the same day? Because again, I think both of them are extremely important. So would you be willing to accept, I don't know if it's a day of remembrance for 1 year, while you have the opportunity to work on this and come back with something better?
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, everyone, and I think you all know me well enough that I'm always willing to work together. In this case, I did hear the suggestion of looking at a day of remembrance. We looked at everywhere that came up in statute. The only two other days of remembrance were Pearl Harbor Day and 9/11, and it sort of felt like that was, that was a category of distinction. I certainly wouldn't be opposed to bringing this holiday into that, but it already is a state observance, and so I think what we were really looking for with this was to sort of have the recognition that, as they've done at the federal level, that it was worthy of sort of being its own standalone state holiday. This day bears a lot of significance to a lot of people, as you mentioned. It is the culmination of the Emancipation Proclamation, and I know, particularly in Portsmouth, we have Juneteenth celebrations, and it's a time where people can gather and sort of mark this history. There's musical celebrations, and a lot of people put a lot of work into it, and so I sort of came to the conclusion that I didn't know that we needed to move it from state observance to to Day of Remembrance, even though I appreciate the suggestion. I think what I'm looking for is really to kind of make it a state holiday. And I understand the concerns raised. It just continues to be an important day to many, and so that's really the change I'm asking for.
Yeah, thank you. I should have said state observance because Senator LeVake brought in that the first time, and we passed it as a state observance.
She did.
And so that's what I'm saying, can we do this for 1 year while everybody kind of figures out how to move forward with this to make this a state holiday?
Okay. Yeah.
That's all I'm seeing if that's what we can do. I'll be more than happy to work with you because I do think the 2 days need to be together, honoring both the beginning and the end. The beginning of the Emancipation Proclamation. I mean, we've combined presidents' birthdays, so we don't. I remember as a kid, we used to get Washington's birthday off and Lincoln's birthday. Now we just have President's Day. Is there a way that we can honor these two pivotal points and bring them together?
I think if I may, Chair, if we are going to leave it as a state observance, I don't really think there's anything to do with this bill. It's already observed in statute that way. So I appreciate the conversation. I just, I guess my ask sort of remains where it is, but I would love to work with you going forward on this.
Senator General.
I think too, and I'm excited when we can bring these things up because it's a history. And it's teaching our young people to observe them. So is it so much the day off as it is really the history of it? And I think about, I'm Native American, so Indigenous People Day, I was frustrated when they changed Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day. And I shouldn't have been. Why? And I guess it's one-off. So what will be the next holiday, if you will? So then we have one group comes up and says, well, this is important. I'm thinking of Littleton. We have Pollyanna Day, but it's not a day off. It's a day of remembrance. And so the second Saturday in June is now known as Pollyanna Day. People don't have the day off. So let's celebrate it. But we start doing all these holidays, paid holidays. I'm surprised somebody didn't come up with April 8th.
My daughter has a day off from school. Don't worry.
I know. And then the town, my hometown has the day off with pay. So it's, I guess for me, it's the fiscal part of it, but it's also what is the real issue? What are we really trying to do here? Make people aware of these historical points in time.
Further discussion? All right, so we're voting on the amendment right now.
Voting on the amendment, yep.
The amendment 1330S, and the motion is ought to pass. Everybody ready? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
So
Those two ayes, I'm sorry.
I
Aye.
thought I heard you.
Yeah.
So by my count, the motion fails 3-2. So we're back to the original bill. We do have an ought to pass motion on the original bill. Any further discussion? All in favor of ought to pass, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion fails 3-2. It's open for another motion. Senator Carson.
I'd like to move interim study.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion? All in favor of interim study, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Passes 3-2.
Do you want to take it out?
If you'd like,
Yeah.
I can take it out, sure.
I want to keep it going.
That is our last Senate bill that we have.
No.
That is. We made it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good spot to get to, because now we've heard, well, we now have 6 more bills, as I said, that were signed last night. I haven't had a chance to review them yet. And so I will schedule some hearings for next week. I was getting to the point where I was like, well, we may not have a hearing next week, but we will. So we'll keep going as long as nobody has a conflict. Senator Altshuler.
Yes, I'd like to move, we reopen 481.
reconsider 481?
Reconsider 481. Yeah,
Is there a second?
thanks.
All right. All in favor of reconsideration? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye.
Although I did not vote on the prevailing side, so never mind.
Yeah, so I think I misunderstood. I thought that I want to make sure that my vote for interim study was in favor of keeping this movement alive, because to be honest, I'm super disappointed that this isn't going forward, because it seems like we're just throwing up some roadblocks that aren't really that big that we can get over, and the amendment would have given us the grace to work out the details, and I feel like interim study just kind of kicks the can a little bit and doesn't recognize the solemnity of the opportunity at hand, and in solidarity with keeping that movement going forward, I voted to continue with interim study, and I would like to change my vote to support the prime sponsor
Okay, so
on the record for the calendar.
So that you've asked for reconsideration?
Yes.
The motion on the table right now is interim study. Well, actually, if we're reconsidering, we can make a new motion, right? I think we have to make a new motion.
I'll make the motion of interim study again.
Is there a second? I will second. Any further discussion? All in favor of interim study, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, so the interim study motion fails 3-2. The only motion we have left is ITL.
I make a motion we ITL.
Wait a minute, did the interim study fail?
Yes, 3-2. 2-3. You and I voted for, and Carrie voted against, yes.
Oh.
So the only motion we have left now is ITL, because ought to pass didn't survive, and interim study didn't survive. So Senator Gendreau moves ITL. Is there a second?
So just to be clear, if we ITL it, I want to understand where we are and make sure we're making the right moves. So if we did vote it inexpedient to legislate today, that lasts through the end of this session, and so allows me to work on it and bring it back next year, because it would be a new
Either way it does.
biennium.
Yeah, any motion we make does, because it's, you're going into a new session next year.
Okay.
Can I mention the reason why I moved
Well,
interim?
we actually don't have a motion that's
Yeah.
on the table right now, so we're sort of having a discussion without a motion, because there was not a second yet for the ITL. So I'll allow a discussion so that
Yeah.
maybe we can get to a place where we can make a motion we can support.
I can't support ITL. I moved interim study because this, I think, is an important issue. And I think that ITL sends the message, it's dead.
Right.
I think interim study sends the message, there's merit, it just needs a little more work. And I would rather send the message that this has merit and we need to work on this and make the commitment to work with you, Senator Perkins Coca, to bring forward something that will answer the questions and hopefully bring something forward in the next term, if we're here, that we can pass, we can all agree on. I can't support an ITL. I at this point, I can't.
And I would concur, and that's the reason that I supported interim study, because I understand, and I'm been trying to help you find a way to move this forward. We just
I
haven't
know,
gotten
I know.
And so that's why I haven't, that's why I supported interim study as well. I think it sends the message that the committee isn't opposed.
Oh, geez, we're gonna be at an impasse. We were saying something about bills going forward with no recommendation.
This may be one of them if we can't find
Look
it.
what you did. You jinxed it.
I didn't say anything, it was him.
Where we're sitting, I mean, I guess at this point, any motion can be made. We can, because we did reconsider, so we can reconsider with any motion. So whoever wants to make a motion, we'll try it again. Yes, we can, we'll have a 5-minute recess.
I wasn't sure. I was like, oh my goodness.
All right, we're going to come back in out of recess into exec session. I think I'm going to recommend to the committee that we hold this off for, we got one more week before we have to vote on this. And I'm going to suggest that we just hold off a little bit and we can decide how we want to proceed with this. It appears the committee doesn't have a consensus in any direction. So I'm going to pull this off right now and we'll take this up next week in an exec session.
Okay, I would agree and I would support that. That's gonna give me time to see if you and I can sit down and figure this out.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
I'll leave with
So the
Days left.
tour we were supposed to do today.
Wait, do we have to withdraw motions, or you can just like,
Wait,
okay, good.
There's no pending
Perfect.
motion.
Great.
Because we reconsidered.
Got it.
and-
That's right, we didn't have a pending motion.
We're gonna hold right there for now. So, the tour we were supposed to have today, obviously I realized about 10:30 that we were running really late and weren't gonna make it, so I did send notice to cancel that, so I will reschedule that another day when I can see we've got a break.
All right. I am looking forward to that.
For me, it's
Me too.
been there, done that. I've spent a lot of hours
Sure.
in the state archives, so,
All right.
okay.
Anything further before we go? I'll schedule hearings for next week. We'll have more House bills. As I said, we received 6 last night, and we'll get those together and have some more on the agenda.
Say one thing. I just want to bring all of your attention to House Bill 1004. We heard it on the 13th. Yesterday in Judiciary, we heard a bill dealing with pretty much the same subject matter. I'm going to go back and take a look at the two of them. So that way, when we go to exec this, that one of them will move forward. Okay? So just to alert everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
We are done for
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you.